Chapter 294 Short Soldier, Part 4. In my youth, I listened to the rain in a brothel with the faint scent of red candles filling the air. In the prime of my life, I listened to the rain in a distant boat on a vast body of water with low-hanging clouds. The sounds of geese crying filled the autumn air. Now, I listen to the rain in a monk's home with the hair at my temples dotted with gray like stars in the night sky. Life goes through ups and downs without stopping to be considerate. All I can do is listen to the rain drip on the front entrance. In the night, someone sat on the ground and drank wine under the canopy of a black tent. Wine spilled from the cup onto the ground, as the person was very drunk. With a sudden surge of inspiration, they recited a poem while listening to the heavy rain outside. His reciting of this poem caused him to laugh. Behind him, some soldiers looked toward the entrance to the tent. The rain had gotten much smaller in the afternoon, but it had picked back up again. This caused the Kuan character on the banner to stick to itself. His Highness the Seventh Prince had arrived 2 days earlier. Only after learning that tens of thousands of Eastern Ling soldiers had been poisoned did he order for the military banner to be changed. The ice-cold raindrops splashed inside, and a soldier raised an arm to block it. "Your Highness the Seventh Prince, come inside the tent to rest. The rain is falling heavier and heavier." Kuan Wushang looked up with bloodshot eyes. "When you look at this rain, what emotions do you feel?" The soldier that had been questioned was stunned. "What emotions?" "This subordinate naturally hopes that the rain will fall harder and harder to have the poison that we planted on Zhu Mountain washed into Eastern Ling's camp. Like that, we can win without needing to fight." The soldier's eyes were filled with joy and respect for Kuan Wushang. In the past, he had not heard of the Seventh Prince. After finding out that he was the new head general, most of the army was quite displeased. He had arrived in a rush on a rainy day. His noble robes were completely soaked from traveling through the rain and wind, and it looked as if water could be squeezed from the light yellow robes. He said, "I won't ask that you overpower the enemy. Instead, I ask that you outsmart them. I have been studying in Immortals Valley for 7 years and naturally have my methods." After this, large sandbags filled with powdered poison were piled onto Zhu Mountain. With the heavy rain and the shape of the terrain, all of the poison was washed on Eastern Ling's side. Within a few days, a scout reported that a large number of soldiers from the Gu family's army had been poisoned. Soldiers perished without a fight, and this mysterious Seventh Prince quickly became a stalwart figure in the minds of the soldiers. Kuan Wushang smiled sarcastically. "That's right. This is how a young person should feel. Listen to the rain from inside a brothel while the fragrance of red candles fills the air. In any case, it's a joyous matter." The soldier did not understand what he meant. "Is your Highness not happy?" Once the situation on the border was reported to the capital, it would definitely be regarded as a military accomplishment. Emperor Kuan would surely reward him. Why did his expression look so ugly? The fragrant wine before him did not seem like it was for a celebration. Instead, it looked a bit like wine meant to drown his sorrows. Happy? He could not bring himself to rejoice. Life goes through many ups and downs without ever stopping to rest. We can rejoice for now, but what about in the future? With such a large quantity of poison flowing into Eastern Ling's borders, it will extend far past where the Gu family's army is camped. For at least 1 decade, absolutely nothing will grow. Aside from soldiers, it will also hurt innocent citizens. When the history books are written, I, Kuan Wushang, will be viewed as a war criminal." The soldiers fell silent for a moment. "But you will be someone who will have contributed the most to our Western Kuan." Kuan Wushang said, "You're wrong. There's nothing that can remain unchanged. The 3 countries of Western Kuan, Northern Li, and Eastern Ling have been separated for no more than 100 years. Things are constantly changing. It's possible that the three countries will unite in a few decades, and responsibility for this poisoned and blood-soaked land will fall on me. The evidence is irrefutable. When that time came, when there was neither a Western Kun nor Eastern Ling, there would only be a unified continent. The residents of the three countries would spurn him. For the sake of personal gain, a perfectly fine region would become a hell on earth. The fertile land would become a desolate wasteland. After all, something like using such a large quantity of poison during a war had never been done before, and nobody had ever thought of it. Coming back around on the matter, when he was young, he set out for Immortals Valley on his own. Rather than learn medicine, he insisted on learning about poisons. Was it not just for this day? The soldier hesitated, then helped hold him up while quietly saying, "It's already quite amazing that we could take some of Eastern Ling's wealthy cities. How could the three countries unite?" This subordinate feels that the three countries will always remain divided. Northern Li to the north was the largest of the three countries, yet it never attacked Western Kun or Eastern Ling, while Western Kun was unable to defeat Eastern Ling, and Eastern Ling had no interest in invading Western Kun. The three countries were in a delicate balance. Not even Western Kun's continued belligerence could break this balance. The vast majority of people felt this way, not just the soldiers. Emperor Kun alone refused to give up on the idea of annexing Eastern Ling before devouring Northern Li. His ambitions were too grand. They were so grand that they would not come true even after he died. Kun Wushang had a strange smile on his face. That's right. If the three countries can continue to remain divided like this, how great would that be? He suddenly pushed the soldier away and staggered into the tent, passed down this order. Have the spies closely monitor the Gu family's army's movements. Once the rain stops, immediately launch an assault. On this rainy night, the main tent in the Gu family's army's camp was brightly illuminated with many people coming and going. A cloud of death hung over the camp, as everyone wore distressed expressions without the slightest hint of anger. Watching the soldiers that fought alongside them pass away without putting up a fight and without suffering created a stifling atmosphere. Reporting to head general, sure enough, the Western Kun's army is under the Kun banner. The new general is the 7th prince of Western Kun, Kun Wushang. Reporting to head general, all of the sandbags that could be moved have already been moved over, but it can only block the flow of the water. I fear that it won't be able to prevent the poison from seeping in. Reporting to head general, all of the best doctors in the nearby cities have already been brought over. They are currently working hard with the military doctors to treat the soldiers. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Gu Huaijiang sat behind a desk while remaining as composed as usual. Have the people sent to the capital already set out? They set out the day after we discovered that the water was the source of the poison. They should have already arrived at the capital. It's just that I fear that it will take over 10 days for Yu Fu to arrive at Zhuguan. When he brought up Yu Fu, everyone carefully observed Gu Huaijiang's expression to try and find any hint of hesitation in his eyes. Gu Huaijiang looked around at everyone, and they all lowered their curious eyes. He turned around. There was not just hesitation in his eyes. There was also concern and helplessness. If he had any other choice, he truly hoped to have Yu Fu always remain in the capital and remain the princess that he could protect. He hoped that she could live a happy and carefree life. Unfortunately, tell the doctors that even if they can't fully treat the poison, they need to do their best to delay the onset of the poison. Over 10,000 soldiers have already died. The survivors absolutely must be kept alive during that time. Gu Shubai said, over 100,000 soldiers drank the poisoned water. Too many have already died as a result of being poisoned. After so many days have passed, the ones who were lightly poisoned, like General Yen, have already started recovering. There are another 50,000 who are still recovering in bed. Yen Huasher drank half a cup of tea and suffered from diarrhea for an entire day. After spending 3 days recovering in bed, he was barely able to get up. He was fortunate. The water in the main tent was the cleanest in the camp and had the lowest concentration of poison. He also had a strong and healthy body, thus he gradually started recovering after drinking some detoxifying medicine. The normal soldiers of the army were not as lucky. It's extremely fortunate that we noticed that the water was poisoned early on. Now that the camp is using water from Zhu Guan for food, no new cases of poisoning have occurred. Gu Huaijiang nodded his head. It's good that nothing has happened to Zhu Guan city citizens. Aside from curing the poison, the most important matter is to pay close attention to the movements of Western Kuan's army. Our soldiers have been poisoned and lost a great deal of fighting power. Now is their best chance to attack. Lao Jin beat his chest and replied, Head General, don't worry. Even if we must breathe our last breath, we won't allow Western Kuan to succeed. In the past, nobody had ever said such a thing during battle. The Gu family's army was accustomed to winning their battles and never losing, nor had they ever encountered such an urgent situation. The current problem was that they lacked manpower. Aside from the ones who had been poisoned, they also needed people to take care of them. The remaining people were few and disordered. The army was in a panic, and when there was panic, it made it difficult to combat the enemy. All this time, the rain continued to fall. This heavy rain really benefited Western Kuan. Gu Huaijiang looked into the rainy night. This rain is about to come to an end. After the rain stops, a new round of fighting will quickly begin. Early the next morning, the group bringing water from Zhu Guan was in high spirits, cheering as soon as they entered the camp. The main tent could faintly hear the sound of this commotion, and Gu Huaijiang did not quite believe what he was hearing. The army was in a dire situation filled with soldiers who were sick. Who could possibly be rejoicing at a time like this? Gu Jiugu pushed the curtain to the side and found his sight partially obstructed by the rain. It was as Gu Huaijiang had said. It was finally about to stop raining. Father, it's the group that went to fetch water. I'll go and see what they're doing. A crowd of people was gathered in one place, and Gu Jiugu pushed the soldiers aside until he saw a snort soldier wearing a raincoat in the middle. A large bamboo hat obstructed their face, and their appearance could not be seen. How could such a short soldier have been sent to fetch water? Just as Gu Jiugu was about to start questioning the soldiers, the short soldier looked up, and a beautiful and familiar face appeared. A smile appeared on their pale lips. Chapter 295 The Scene Behind the Screen, Part 1. This is life-scattering poison. It's one of Immortals Valley's secret drugs. Master did not teach him how to make it. I don't know how he managed to learn about it. Upon arriving at the camp, Yu Fu went straight to the barracks to see the poisoned soldiers. After meeting with the doctors, she immediately understood and quickly ascertained the poison. An old doctor with a white beard asked, What exactly is this life-scattering poison? We have been discussing this matter for many days, but we haven't been able to figure anything out. Since it was a secret drug from Immortals Valley, it was naturally inconvenient for Yu Fu to tell them directly. The most unique point of life-scattering poison is how quickly the poison spreads. It's usually used when trapped in an ambush by the enemy, as it can be spread over a large area to escape. Since the wells have been poisoned, the land has surely also become poisoned. She turned and gave an order to a soldier, immediately report to head general. Have him forbid the soldiers from eating vegetables that were grown in the ground here, as well as any poultry. After saying this, she pulled a container out of her medicine kit and fed its contents to a soldier. Doctors, you've worked hard. The method for producing the antidote to life-scattering poison is quite complicated, and I don't have that much antidote on me. Give the soldiers that have been poisoned a bowl of 4-herb decoction to reduce the effects of the poison on their bodies and wait for me to finish preparing the antidote. Yes, we'll do that immediately. The doctors left the tent and saw Gu Huaijiang leading Gu Shubai and the others, along with the other generals, heading toward them. They immediately moved to the side. With a whoosh, the curtain was pushed aside. Sitting next to a soldier's bed was a young girl dressed in plain clothes. Her figure was extremely familiar. Her hair was loose and puffy, her clothes were plain, and her loosely fitting pants were covered in mud. A pair of sheepskin boots that did not match with her clothes were soaked by the rain. Was this Yu Fu? The Yu Fu that they knew had never looked so exhausted before. The soldiers that took the antidote quickly opened their eyes. Blurrily seeing a beauty sitting next to the bed with a smile on her face, he thought that he had died. Taking another look around, he saw the head general and young general standing at the entrance to the tent. It was only then that he realized he was not dead. Head general, this subordinate can still fight and can still kill enemies. Yu Fu heard his words and turned around. Was that not Gu Huaijiang and the others standing behind her? A light flickered through her eyes. Her large and brilliant eyes were smiling. In the instant that she saw them, all of the exhaustion from the long journey dissipated. The group across from her saw her smile, and all gloominess instantly vanished. Yu Fu, Gu Shubai stepped forward and anxiously looked her over, quickly noticing her paper-white lips and the bruise on her right wrist. The joy of the reunion was quickly replaced with concern. What happened to you? Are you sick? Are you hurt? Yu Fu lowered her head out of embarrassment. I'm fine. Treating the poisoned soldiers is the most pressing matter. Right, you guys weren't poisoned, right? She looked at Gu Huaijiang, Gu Jiugu, Gu Hanamo, and Gu Shubai. Seeing that everyone's complexion could be considered decent and seemed to be relatively alert, she felt at ease. She stood up and handed the small container to Gu Shubai. This is all of the antidotes that I have. The rest needs to be made now. Give this antidote to the soldiers who are closest to death. I have already told the doctors to distribute 4-herb decoction to the soldiers to reduce the effects of the poison. This will buy me some time, and I will immediately go prepare some more antidote. Yu Fu wiped the rainwater from her brow and immediately had a soldier lead her to the tent where the military doctors were posted. Yaolan carried her medicine kit and followed closely. Master and servant were both young girls who had not yet become of age. To have traveled such a great distance in the wind and rain, who knew just how much they had suffered? Where are the people who came with the young miss? This subordinate is here. The 10 guards who had accompanied Yu Fu from the capital were covered in just as much dirt, their entire bodies covered in mud. Fortunately, none of them were injured. Gu Shubai asked, the letter from the army was only sent out 2 days ago. How did young miss get here so quickly? Young miss set out the day after the Mid-Autumn Festival. Based on what was said in the manor, there was a letter from the immortal practitioner of medicine, Tian Shu. Upon reading it, young miss immediately wanted to rush out. Gu Jiugu wore a highly critical expression. Fourth brother and the others just watched her leave without trying to stop her. The soldier lifted his head with a troubled expression. He wanted to tell the truth but was afraid that the ones to be criticized would not be fourth young sir and the others. That. The young miss left before the sun came up. We set out before fourth young sir and the others got up. After a moment of silence, Gu Hanamo lifted his sword and looked at him sideways. It's the fourth young sir who makes the final decision in the manor. Without an order from him, you dared to bring Yu Fu here. It seems that you want to be on the receiving end of the military baton. All 10 dropped to their knees, with none daring to argue. All right, if you have time to ask for them to be punished, it would be better to arrange a tent for Yu Fu to rest in. Gu Huaijiang quietly walked out, and the 10 were finally able to let out a sigh of relief. Based on this, it seemed that he did not intend to punish them for acting without permission. Yanzheng heard the news and ran inside. Seeing the soldier sitting on the bed, he rejoiced, "Hey, you've gotten better." You're already able to sit up. The soldier seated on the bed cheerfully nodded. Young Miss Yu Fu gave me the antidote. She personally gave it to me. She had personally given it to him. What was so great about that? He actually tried to show off in front of him. Yanjing unhappily looked away and saw 10 people kneeling on the ground. What are you kneeling for? Quickly get up. Head general has already left. Is it possible that the young general will punish you? Young general is all too thankful. Gu Shubai glanced at him with a smile, but his eyes were emotionless. Yanjing immediately shut his mouth. The 10 took this cue to say something that nobody liked. We atoned for our misdeeds by doing something good. We even taught young Miss Yu Fu a technique for if she fell off her horse. If not for this, young Miss and Miss Yaolan would have suffered greatly from their falls. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Technique for if they fell from a horse. Gu Jiugu gnashed his teeth and spoke one word at a time. How did you teach this? Yu Fu's arrival at the camp was like the sun rising and scattering the clouds away. The atmosphere in the camp immediately changed. The poisoned soldiers started recovering one by one, and the sky that had been pouring for consecutive days finally showed signs of clearing up. The air was no longer filled with the pungent smell of mud. After a busy day of work from morning until supper, she finally had a chance to take a break. Yaolan, I want to take a bath before going to the main tent. Yaolan understood, then I will go and keep watch outside the tent. Young miss, take your time with your bath. Yu Fu stood behind the screen and quickly removed her clothes. During the past few days, the most important skill that she had learned was to make good use of her time. For the women from large families in the capital, 2 people were needed to help remove their clothes. By the time that the clothes were removed, the water would already be cold. In the past, this could also be said of Yu Fu. Now, with nobody to help her, she was able to quickly remove her clothes and soak her entire body in hot water. The sky was just starting to darken. The air after the rain was particularly calming. Yaolan sat outside the tent, and she quickly started yawning and nodding off. The soldiers standing guard saw her and covered their mouths to laugh, quietly saying, Miss Yaolan and young Miss are the same age. Look at how young Miss traveled all the way to the camp and even worked all day. It seemed as if she wasn't tired at all, yet Miss Yaolan is so tired that she's falling asleep. The soldier to his side sighed, do you really think that young Miss isn't tired? She's just forcing herself to endure it. She doesn't want head general and the others to worry. It's all the fault of those unprincipled bastards from Western Kuan, actually using poison. Just as they were discussing this matter, they saw Gu Shubai walk over from the distance with a basket of food. The 2 soldiers immediately called to him and pointed at Yaolan, who was sleeping outside the tent, gesturing for him to not make too much noise. Gu Shubai nodded his head and did not make a sound, carrying the food basket into the tent. Yaolan rested her cheek on her hand with her mouth opened wide. She was leaning her entire body against a pillar. They had been waiting in the main tent for Yu Fu to eat dinner, but no matter how long they waited, she never came. They figured that Yu Fu must have fallen asleep from being exhausted, thus Gu Shubai decided to deliver the food to her tent. Who knew that when he entered the tent, Yu Fu would not be inside? He put the food basket on a table and looked around. Steam rose from behind a screen. Why would Yu Fu have gone out while preparing medicine? She must have become muddled from being so busy. Between master and servant, one was missing, and the other was sleeping outside the entrance. Gu Shubai helplessly shook his head and walked toward the screen. Fortunately, it was not as if he had not helped Yu Fu keep an eye on the firewood. Steam continued to rise, and he started to feel that things were strange the closer he got. Just how much water had Yu Fu boiled for medicine? The faint smell of grass filled the air. It was completely different from the smell of medicine that he was accustomed to, but it was a little familiar. It was like the bath beans that Yu-Fu loved to use. At the same time, the sound of something landing in the water came from behind the screen. It sounded as if someone had scooped up some water from the tub and allowed it to fall back down. Gu Shubai immediately stopped in his tracks and froze. A strange guess appeared in his mind, as he slowly turned his head and looked behind the screen. Chapter 296. It was actually a dudu. Part 2. Gu Shubai's position was a little awkward. From where he was standing, he could only see a third of the bathtub. Through the rising steam, he could only see a pair of nimble feet that belonged to a young girl resting against the edge of the tub. That pair of feet were like lotus flowers that blossomed after heavy rain. They were delicate and white, and the nails were like polished shells that were carefully inlaid to create the most beautiful form. The 10 small toes were like freshly peeled lotus seeds. No, they were even nimbler and whiter than lotus seeds. No, they should be compared to fresh water lilies. They were so tender that water could be squeezed from them. The young girl occasionally scooped water up from the tub to pour it onto herself. Having traveled for many days, she was exhausted. Upon entering the tub, she was like a fish that had been reintroduced to water. She absolutely did not want to go out. Clatter-dash, she removed her hairpin and placed it to the side, her long hair cascading down like a waterfall. Taking a deep breath, she plunged into the water. The pair of feet remained on the edge of the tub. With the change in position, even her calves were on the edge of the tub. As a result, Gu Shubai saw even more. Aside from that pair of feet that were like lotus flowers, there were a pair of calves crossed over each other. The skin was as white as snow. He unconsciously averted his gaze, as all sorts of images flashed through his mind. Her slightly knitted brows and smile, her intelligence and understanding, her exhausted appearance from braving the rain and wind, the way that she smiled at the soldiers while sitting next to the soldiers that had been poisoned. That had been the most beautiful smile that he had seen in this life. The way a proper man should act clashed with his attraction to the girl that he loved the most. In the end, neither won out. Gu Shubai turned his head and felt at a loss, not knowing whether he should advance or retreat. Yu-Fu quietly gasped. His line of sight instantly shifted, as he looked in her direction. Looking up past the calves, he could only see her knees, and they were covered in bruises from when she fell. There were also some scrapes that were particularly eye-catching on her snow-white skin. Her earlier gasp must have been a result of her accidentally bumping those wounds. He could no longer hold back. Turning around, he tapped the screen twice. "Yu-Fu, are you all right?" This was Gu Shubai's voice. Inside the tub, Yu-Fu froze. In the following instant, her face turned bright red, as she fully immersed her entire body in the water. I'm fine. When had he come in, and why had he not made a single sound? Yao Lan did not even warn her. Who knew if he saw anything? Without even looking, Gu Shubai knew what the sudden splashing sound was from. He smiled. "Your journey must have been exhausting. You should take a good bath. I brought your dinner. Eat it after you finish taking your bath." Yu-Fu thought that he would leave after he finished speaking and never expected to hear what came next. "There's no rush. I'll wait for you outside." Yu-Fu, the tent was only so large. For someone like Gu Shubai, whose hearing was sharper due to his training in martial arts, he was definitely able to hear every single one of her movements. No matter how she thought about it, being heard bathing was an extremely embarrassing matter. Yu-Fu stammered, "Aw. In truth, I already finished bathing. I will be out immediately." Due to the screen, she could not see Gu Shubai's smile and delighted expression. His Yu-Fu had truly grown up. Last year in Changzhou, she had said with a straight face that she wanted to sleep in the same room as him, which was something that had infuriated Gu Jiugu, while Yu Fu herself did not feel that anything improper was happening. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Within a single year, she was now able to blush due to embarrassment. This was good. This would keep her from being taken advantage of due to her young age and innocence. Yu Fu sat up in the tub and looked around with a frantic expression. Where were her clothes? She had come in to take a bath, yet Yao Lan did not even prepare a change of clothes for her. Yu Fu did not know what to do. After hesitating for a long while, it was Gu Shubai who noticed that there was no sound coming from behind the screen and asked, "What's wrong? Do you not have clothes prepared for after your bath?" Yu Fu said, "I brought a change of clothes, but I don't know where Yao Lan put them." "Where is she?" Gu Shubai stood up. "She's sleeping outside the tent." To not have woken up after such a long time, it seems that she really was exhausted. "I'll help you look for your clothes." A wave of irritation washed over Yu Fu. It turned out that Yao Lan had fallen asleep. It was no wonder there was no report when he came in. He looked around the bed and table and very quickly found a bag. Opening it, he found Yu Fu's clothes inside. He did not know what Yu Fu wanted to wear and randomly picked an apricot yellow set of clothes. Suddenly, he saw a red strap sticking out beneath some smaller garments. Gu that idiot, actually tugged on Yu Fu's doo-doo. Gu Xiang's words suddenly flashed through his mind. With a start, he immediately covered the red strap up with the smaller garments. After a brief pause, he lifted the smaller garments that had been used to cover the red strap. He could not have Yu Fu come out wearing nothing but outer garments, right? He hastily picked some other clothes from the garments inside and sent the stack of clothes through the screen. Behind the screen, a thin and white arm reached out as far as it possibly could. "Thank you, eldest brother." Gu Shubai stared at the bruise on her hand but did not say anything. Yu Fu spread the clothes out on her own. He was very considerate. Knowing that Yu Fu would be busy in the coming days, he deliberately chose a set of clothes that was a bit more plain. The apricot yellow was neither conspicuous nor flowery. It was very suitable for a military doctor to wear. With so many soldiers dying, clothes that were vibrant colors could not be worn. When she thought of this, she thought to herself that she would need to remind Yao Lan of this later on. When she suddenly saw the red piece of clothing, she truly wished to die on the spot. It was actually a doo-doo, a bright red doo-doo. Chapter 297 Unbuttoning Her Clothes, Part 3. Gu Shubai laid out the dishes, and Yu Fu came out from behind the screen a long while later. Her long hair was soaked and tied up behind the young girl's waist, while she had nothing but embroidered shoes on her feet. Upon smelling the food, her index finger twitched. "Is there chicken soup?" On humid rainy days, drinking a bowl of hot chicken soup was most comforting. Yu Fu forgot about the earlier awkwardness and sat down to obediently wait for Gu Shubai to pour her some soup. Sure enough, the soup had bits of ginger. "I haven't had such good chicken soup in a long time. It's really too comforting." She drank an entire bowl of soup in a single breath. Gu Shubai received the bowl and ladled more soup into it. "Just what sort of hardship did you experience on your way here that you would find the bowl of chicken soup to be so delicious?" Yu Fu thought to herself that this was not good. Thinking that he was about to notice, she hastily explained, "That's not it. The trip here was quite smooth. It's just that I rushed to arrive at the camp today and was truly starving. That's why I found this bowl of chicken soup to be so delicious." Gu Shubai placed the refilled bowl of soup in front of her. "Is it just because you were starving? Then what about the bruise on your hands and legs?" Cough. Yu Fu choked on the chicken soup. Lowering her head, she coughed, and Gu Shubai helped gather her wet hair and hold it behind her head. Sure enough, he had noticed. How else would he have known about the injuries on her legs? If he saw, then he saw, but to say it out loud. Could he not act as if he had not seen? Yu Fu's face was redder than words could describe, and Gu Shubai said, "Are you mad?" Yu Fu was not angry, but she definitely felt embarrassed. She was no longer a young child. She was no longer the little girl from Immortals Valley who could casually bathe in a ravine. Rather than anger, it would be more accurate to say that it was embarrassment. It was the young girl gaining a sense of shame from maturing. She did not speak, and Gu Shubai continued, "I thought that you were not here," and the steam continued to rise from behind the screen. "I wanted to help you keep an eye on the fire. It was only when I got there that I saw your feet resting on the edge of the tub. I did not get any closer after that." It turned out that he saw the injuries on her legs because of that. Yu Fu quietly let out a sigh of relief and suddenly started smiling. "Like I was saying, how could eldest brother possibly peek on a young girl bathing? Of course, I wouldn't peek at a young girl bathing. I would wait for that young girl to grow up." Yu Fu was surprised and said, "Grow up? What happens after that?" Gu Shubai slightly raised his brow. "After growing up, would go and bathe with her." Yu Fu, now that the soldiers could be saved, it seemed that someone was in a great mood and was starting to mess around with her. She tightly held the bowl of food, as anger and shame turned to hunger. Gu Shubai sat to the side and watched. While watching her, he noticed the red band under her broad collar. He suddenly stood up, giving Yu Fu a fright. With a mouth full of food, she looked up at him. "What's wrong?" She actually asked him what was wrong. Who knew if she had been too embarrassed or just did not know how to put her clothes on without the help of a maidservant, as she did not notice that she had missed a button. It was no wonder her collar was loose enough that her duduk could be seen. Visit Wuxia EU for extra chapters. He felt a sense of disappointment in her lack of self-awareness. Reaching out with both hands, he grabbed her then unbuttoned the buttons of her shirt. An explosion went off inside Yu Fu's head, as she had no time to think about anything. Swallowing the food that she had in her mouth in a daze, she closed her eyes. She was afraid that her face would become as red as a monkey's, but if she kept her eyes open. The man's long and deft hands were accustomed to holding swords and drawing bows, and there were slight calluses on the fingers. He worked quickly, moving from button to button in her shirt. After a moment, his movements came to a stop, but things did not go as Yu Fu had imagined. She opened her eyes, and Gu Shubai was already sitting back down in his seat. He was pouring a third bowl of soup for her with a serene look on his face. Yu Fu instantly realized something and sat upright, cursing herself for having such strange thoughts. She must have been too exhausted from the journey to think of such meaningless things. Gu Shubai took a look at her expression from the corner of his eyes. He really wanted to laugh but had no choice but to desperately suppress it. Only after smelling the fragrance of wild grass coming from her body did he realize that he had not been this happy for a long time. "Yu Fu, it's really good that you came." Yu Fu looked at him in a daze. Was he relying on her? She was a little delighted and put down her bowl. "It was I who wanted to come. In truth, even without me, you could have gone to Immortals Valley to ask for help. Since Master has accepted this engagement, he will not just sit idly by and watch." Gu Shubai shook his head and said, "Before we discovered that the wells had been poisoned, Father and I have suspected that such a thing could happen. We sent some people to Immortals Valley to investigate. Who knew that the road to Immortals Valley had already been blocked by Western Kuan's army? We had absolutely no way of getting through. By the time that this information had been brought back, the wells had already been poisoned. So that's the case." It's no wonder second senior disciple wrote a letter to tell me to think of something and did not send people himself. I thought that he was just following master's rule about not getting involved in affairs between countries, but it turns out that he had no way of getting through. Since Kun Wushang was willing to do this sort of disgraceful thing, it's natural that he would be thorough in his considerations and not allow people from Immortals Valley to come. Gu Shubai said, so it was Tian Shu who wrote you a letter. It's no wonder you arrived so soon. If you did not come, Father was extremely reluctant to bring you here. It must have been hard for you. Soaked by the storm and covered in injuries, even the soldiers who went out to fight the enemy felt sorry for her, much less her family. Yu Fu put down her bowl and smiled, saying, it wasn't hard. I've eaten my fill. Yao Lan is also injured. I need to wake her up to apply medicine to her body. She's injured, but are you just going to ignore your own injuries? He gestured to the bed with his chin, motioning for Yu Fu to move there. If you've eaten your fill, go and lie down. I will apply the medicine for you. Chapter 298 That's to deceive him, Part 4. Yu Fu wrote out the prescription for the antidote for the military doctors, leaving the doctors to work overnight to prepare the medicine. Only like this was Yu Fu able to get a good night of sleep. The next morning, a cold wind suddenly started blowing. Yu Fu tugged on the thin blanket covering her and got a thicker one before continuing to sleep. Not long later, she suddenly noticed that something was off. Still groggy, she started looking around. At some point, the skylight of the tent had been opened up, and the wind was blowing into the tent. The surprising part was that the wind was lacking in humidity. The air was surprisingly dry. After several days of heavy rain, the sudden dryness of the air made people feel quite comfortable. Yu Fu immediately got up to get dressed and go out. In the outer room, she found Yao Lan sleeping on a small bed with her saliva wetting the pillow. She helplessly shook her head but did not wake Yao Lan. Moving quietly, she headed out. In the instant that she opened the tent flap, her hand immediately retreated as if it had been shocked. She then looked down at her clothes to verify that her shirt had been properly buttoned up. Sure enough, it was already bright outside, and there were many puddles of many sizes on the ground. There were soldiers rushing around in the distance. It seemed that they were organizing the army's rations and weapons. Young miss, you've woken up. The soldier that had been standing guard outside her tent last night arrived with breakfast and saw that she was going out. Where is young miss going? Yu Fu smiled. I don't know how the soldiers that were poisoned are doing now, so I was going to take a look. Young miss, how about eating a meal before going? Don't worry. The doctors worked overnight, and most of the soldiers have recovered. Young miss' antidote was truly too effective. With this, Yu Fu felt at ease. Upon arriving the previous day, she immediately started working to prepare medicine for the soldiers. She was so exhausted that she immediately fell asleep when her head hit her pillow. When Yu Fu thought of how she had not yet gone to properly visit Gu Huaijiang, she said, just leave it there for now. If Yao Lan wakes up, just tell her that I have gone to the main tent. Very well, this subordinate will leave it in the tent. After Yu Fu left, the soldier glanced inside the tent. The master had woken up, yet the servant was still asleep. This maidservant surely had some amazing background. Arriving near Gu Huaijiang's main tent, the soldiers had solemn expressions. Seeing Yan Jing stand guard outside, she hastily asked, "What's wrong? Has something happened to the poisoned soldiers?" Yan Jing cupped his hands. Young miss, don't worry. The soldiers that were poisoned have already started recovering. It's just that they aren't able to immediately go out and fight. But look, the sky has cleared up. Yan Zheng's brow was tightly furrowed, and Yu Fu lowered her head to think things over. I'll trouble you with going in to report to head general that I want to see him. What is there to report? With a whoosh, Yenjing opened the door to the tent. "Young miss, just go in. Head General won't get angry." With the door opened, everyone inside the tent looked toward the door. They immediately saw Yu Fu standing outside, and Yu Fu had no choice but to grit her teeth and go in. Seeing everyone frowning, she thought to herself that this was bad. "Head General." Yu Fu stepped forward and saluted. Gu Huaijiang strode over to her and picked her up. "There's no need to be so formal. You have suffered a great deal to travel here. The poisoned soldiers have already started to recover. With the doctors keeping an eye on the preparation of medicine, why don't you get some more sleep?" Yu Fu looked over at Gu Shubai and the others, then at Lao Jin. "Since the poisoned soldiers have been saved, why is everyone so worried?" "Because the sky has cleared up. Western Kuan's people won't let go of this opportunity to attack so easily. The scouts have reported that they are currently consolidating their forces and will be attacking soon. However, the soldiers that were poisoned cannot get out of bed, thus cannot set foot on the battlefield." Gu Huaijiang continued, "You came at the perfect time. Since you have already given the doctors the prescription for the antidote, there's no need for you to stay here. I will have Yanjing escort you to Zhuguan City. It's too dangerous at the camp. It's not suitable for you to stay here." Yu Fu looked at him in surprise, never expecting the situation to be so dire. If there was even the slightest chance of victory, Gu Huaijiang would not think of sending her somewhere else. He would rather protect Yu Fu himself. Yu Fu hastily said, "No. Since I have come, I never intended to leave. Head General and elder brothers are all here. How can I just leave?" Gu Huaijiang helplessly turned around and gave Gu Shubai a look, and the latter advised Yu Fu, "Yu Fu, listen to father and don't stay here. You don't know martial arts. If anything were to happen, how do you want us to feel about it?" They would rather get hurt or even die than see anything happen to Yu Fu. The battle had not yet been fought, but tens of thousands of soldiers had already died. They were no longer able to withstand any further changes. The other people present also tried to plead with Yu Fu, "Young miss, listen to the head general. You have already done enough good. If not for you, who knows how many of us would already be dead." "That's right, young miss. You're a girl. You can't compare with men like us. Let Yanjing escort you into the city. Fighting will soon break out here." Yu Fu said, "Immortals Valley's antidotes are complicated, and the soldiers are suffering from varying degrees of poisoning. For the soldiers who have been severely poisoned, if I am not here, they will die. I can't leave. I need to stay here to take care of them." Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. She used the lives of the soldiers as an excuse, and everyone immediately became hesitant. Yu Fu's life was a life, and the soldiers' lives were also lives. If they allowed those soldiers to die by sending Yu Fu away, they would find the situation even more unacceptable. Yan Zheng, who was listening from outside the door, was panicked. If he was told to escort Yu Fu into the city, he would not be able to go onto the battlefield with everyone else. With head general and young general on the front line, how could he go and hide in the city on his own? How would he be any different from a deserter? Yu Fu thought for a moment, then said, "Is there any way to delay the battle to give me 5 days? As long as I am given 5 days, most of the soldiers that were poisoned will have regained the strength to fight. At that time, we will surely have a chance of victory in battle against Western Kuan." Gu Shubai shook his head, "Not to mention delaying them by 5 days, but we can't even delay them by 5 hours. For Kuan Wushang to perpetrate such an evil thing without worrying about criticism by future generations, was it not for the sake of taking advantage of when our soldiers have died or become sick from the poison?" Gu Zhougu said, "That's right. Based on Kuan Wushang's keen awareness, he will not miss this great opportunity. Right now, our only option is to organize our remaining troops to fight back against the enemy. Even if, we can't allow them to reach Zhu Guan. Even without saying the sentence in full, everyone present fell silent. Even if the entire army was annihilated, they could not allow Western Kuan's army to reach Zhu Guan. They could not allow them to have an opportunity to trouble the citizens. Zhu Guan, Weizhou, Changchuan, even the lesser Zhu Pass behind them had countless citizens that trusted them and the protection that they provided because of the security that they had provided at the border. They could not allow themselves to disappoint the citizens and allow the reputation of Eastern Ling's soldiers to be tainted. Amidst the silence, Yu Fu suddenly said, "Then that is to say that it's certain that Western Kuan's new general is Kuan Wushang?" Lao Jin said, "The scouts have confirmed it. Western Kuan's side is flying a banner with the Kuan character. At present, the only one in Western Kuan's imperial family capable of leading troops is the 7th prince. Half of the troops under his command are from the Liu family's army and half are from the Wang family's army. Initially, we were planning to use this to try and stir up a conflict to delay the battle. Unfortunately, the two armies have faith in him. They think that his use of poison was exceptional." Yan Huasher sneered, "They actually think this sort of unconscionable thing is good." "That's true. As long as they can clear out our Gu family's army, they will be able to claim Zhu Guan, which is something that they have failed to do for decades. Western Kuan truly is barbaric. They can't look at things like normal people would." Gu Huaijiang turned around and said with regret, "Do soldiers understand such grand ideals? What they know is to follow orders. If the general says something is right, then it's right. That's how things are in Western Kuan. That Western Kuan has this way of doing things, is it not a result of the bellicose Emperor Kuan? I have heard that Western Kuan's crown prince is the exact same as Emperor Kuan, so who knows if the flames of war will ever die down," Yu Fu said. "It now seems that Kuan Wushang is even worse than Emperor Kuan and the crown prince. But, since he's the head general, I have a way to delay the battle. 5 days should not be a problem." In the midst of the anxiety, Yu Fu's words were like the clear skies outside. They illuminated the hope in everyone's eyes. Yan Zheng's ears were glued to the tent, and it was as if he had become a statue. Gu Shubai said, "What is the method?" Yu Fu smiled and said, "To capture a thief, you must first capture the king. If their head general has already arrived, who else would lead them into battle? Does eldest brother not remember the bottle of medicine that I gave Kuan Wushang when he came to visit Eastern Ling with the special envoy?" Gu Shubai paused. "That medicine." The effects of the medicine were too normal. It was so normal that it did not seem like something that would come from Yu Fu, thus Gu Shubai remembered it very clearly. That was to deceive him. It was actually a Gu poison. Chapter 299 The inside of his treasured chest is Yu Fu, Part 1. Yu Fu never thought that her random actions would be able to temporarily delay the battle. Lao Jin was elated when he entered the tent, and it looked as if he had run here. Young Miss Yu Fu is truly divine. Western Kuan's army had already gathered its army and was about to advance when they suddenly dispersed. Our scouts did not even see the enemy head general. It must be the effect of the poison. If the scouts did not see him, it meant that Kuan Wushang did not even leave the main tent. He must have no clue what sort of tactic he had fallen for. Gu Jiugut slapped the table. "Serves him right. He employed such an underhanded tactic against us, so even if he dies, it would not be enough to atone for his sins. Yu Fu, is your poison capable of killing him?" Yu Fu shook her head without even thinking. "It can't. This Gu poison was never intended to kill people. It can only temporarily weaken people. At that time, it was because he gave Yin Shuo the poison that nearly killed eldest brother that I worried that he would do something treacherous again. As a result, I decided to place a Gu poison near him. If he dared to do anything treacherous again, it would be able to keep him under control. Who knew that it would be useful here? Gu Jiugu was a little disappointed. Is it like that poison butterfly that you used? Yu Fu spoke in a dejected voice. If it was as poisonous as that poison butterfly, Western Kuan's army would be holding a funeral. Although it would not kill Kuan Wushang, it would at least stall him. It gave the Gu family's army some breathing room, and this was already worth rejoicing. Gu Huaijiang asked, Yu Fu, are you certain that it will be able to delay them by 5 days? Yu Fu thought for a bit. It shouldn't be a problem. When I gave him that bottle of poison, I told him to bring it back to Immortals Valley to be turned in as his homework, and he seemed to believe me. But he didn't return to Immortals Valley, and he still hasn't noticed the Gu poison afflicting him after such a long time. This time, it still doesn't seem that he has noticed it. By the time that he does notice it, it will take at least 5 days to treat. Good, there will be many important things for us to take care of during these 5 days. Gu Huaijiang pulled out his token of authority and sternly said, immediately send people out to the cities nearby to look for medicinal supplies. If there isn't enough, ask the courts to send more supplies. We absolutely must have enough of the necessary supplies to decontaminate the poisoned ground around the city. At this critical juncture, Gu Huaijiang used this brief moment of respite to think about the land and water rather than military affairs. In his heart, family and country were always of the utmost importance. Everyone stood up, and Yu Fu fiercely nodded, I will do my best. The sound of beating war drums roared like thunder, but the army did not move out. Following this came the gongs signaling for the soldiers to retreat. It was as if a foolish child was running around the military camp, treating the war drums and retreat gong like toys. Assembling troops and dispersing them had become a game. The morale that Western Kuan's army had worked so hard to regain was instantly lost. With the head general, Kuan Wushang, nowhere to be seen, discussion filled the camp. The entrance to the main tent was closed, with Kuan Wushang's personal guard standing guard outside. Neither the generals from the Liu family's army nor the generals from the Wang family's army were allowed to get close. They had absolutely no idea of what had happened inside the main tent. What happened to His Highness the 7th Prince? Please go in and report and tell him that we wish to see His Highness. A number of generals were gathered outside the main tent, but the personal guards did not move. His Highness is not seeing anyone right now. Everyone, please go back. You didn't even go in to report. How do you know that he doesn't want to see us? The generals had been disrespected by the soldiers and immediately started shouting. With a commotion breaking out outside the tent, one person sat curled up on the bed in the tent. His face was ashen, and he held his chest. His heart was beating so fast that it felt as if it was about to leap out of his chest. This sort of feeling made it feel as if he was struggling to breathe. His years of training in Immortals Valley told him that this was the result of a poison. Luan Yu. He shouted toward the tent's entrance, and commotion outside immediately fell silent, as a guard entered. Yes, what are your highness orders? He looked up and saw that Kuan Wushang's complexion was even worse than before. He hastily stepped forward to help support him, Your Highness. Kuan Wushang waved his hand, I'm fine. Go out and tell those generals to lead their soldiers back. We can't lead the soldiers out today. As for when the soldiers can set out, wait for my order. Luan Yu saw his complexion worsen and gritted his teeth but ultimately retreated. Yes, this subordinate will take care of that immediately. Kuan Wushang held his chest. In the darkness, he thought back on his recent actions. He had studied in Immortals Valley, but he could not be invincible against poisons like Sun Qi, nor had he been dotingly raised by Sun Qi with the best supplements from a young age like Yu Fu. However, he, at the very least, would not be overcome by normal poisons, thus he would not be unable to think back on when he had been poisoned. He thought long and hard, but he could not figure out when exactly he had been poisoned. It just had to happen at this time. If it had happened on any other day, he might have already led his army and taken Zhu Guan. Before setting out to battle, his dear eldest brother led 10,000 allied court officials out in his crown prince's robes and showed off his power. Seventh brother must be sure to take care of yourself. This isn't your first time losing to Marquis Gu. Last time, you had that foolish Emperor Ning to save your life. This time, be careful to not have your head cut off on the battlefield. As he said this, he slid his thumb across his throat, warning him of a decapitation. Even in his dreams, Kun Wushang could not forget about that ferocious look in his eyes. He was the one to volunteer for this expedition. He held too much power in court, and the crown prince's tolerance of him was already at its limit. If he could not return victorious, he would meet a fate even worse than what befell Lu Kuang, who lost hundreds of thousands of troops. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. It just had to happen now. It just had to happen now. Kun Wushang gnashed his teeth and punched a wall. Could this truly be heaven's will? Do the heavens intend to kill me, Kun Wushang? I have patiently endured it since I was young, leaving the palace at a young age to go and study. When I finally managed to claim a proper position in court, have the heavens found me, Kun Wushang, to be so unpleasant? He only dared to become so hysterical when there were no others present. After venting his frustrations, he calmed down a little. His mind then followed a train of thought, connecting dot after dot. From the moment that he arrived at the border to when the moments before he prepared to set out for battle, then back to when he arrived in Western Kuan's court, then back to when he was in Linen. He suddenly remembered something and started flipping through his luggage, throwing his fine clothes to the ground. The floor was a mess, and the chest was a mess, but he finally found what he had been looking for. It was a brocade box that he had always treasured. When Luan Yu had helped him pack his luggage, he had carefully placed it at the very bottom to keep it from getting damaged. He opened the brocade box, and a small embroidered shoe entered his field of view. It was only 3 or 4 inches in length. On the surface of the sky blue shoe was an embroidery of red lychee. It was very realistic. It was immediately clear that the shoe belonged to a pampered little girl. It was a shoe that Yu Fu had worn when she was young. Other shoes were embroidered with flowers, and only this pair had been embroidered with lychees. They were her favorite, so Yu Fu loved them dearly. Later on, when she was playing in Immortals Valley, she dropped a shoe down a cliff. She had been quite sad about this for a spell, and Sun Chi ordered a new pair of shoes embroidered with grapes and peaches for her. Only then did she cheer up. Kun Wushang lifted her small embroidered shoe and endured the pain in his chest. With a smile, he rubbed it a few times. Yu Fu did not know this, but Kun Wushang secretly spent one day and one night searching the bottom of the cliff for the shoe before finding it. For this, he was chastised by Sun Chi for fooling around. He never returned this shoe to Yu Fu and always kept it for himself. He carefully placed the embroidered shoe in the compartment and pulled open a second compartment. Inside was a tooth that resembled a grain of rice. It was one of Yu Fu's baby teeth that had fallen out and been tossed onto a roof, but he secretly went and retrieved it. Looking further down, there was a handkerchief that Yu Fu had used when she was young. It was unreasonably small. Unfolding it now, it was only the size of his palm. There were also locks of hair from when senior disciple's sister had helped her cut her fringe, a pebble that she had gifted him, a bowl of congee that she had brought him when his master had punished him. He had eaten the congee, but the cleaned wooden bowl was kept inside the brocade box. After many years of being caressed, its surface had become smooth and shiny. During his many years at Immortals Valley, he could not even keep track of how many times he had been punished by his master. The only thing that he could remember was that every time that he was punished, the only person who came to visit him with food was Yu Fu. At the very bottom. His hands froze in midair, as he saw the small porcelain bottle quietly laying there. His smile slowly disappeared. Pulling the porcelain bottle out of the box, he sniffed it. The scent of hibiscus was faint but lingered. It was the medicine that Yu Fu had given him to turn in as homework at Immortals Valley. After leaving Eastern Ling, he never returned to Immortals Valley. Naturally, this medicine was never used and was stored in the brocade box like the other things. Yu Fu's treasured chest contained various drugs, while his treasured chest contained Yu Fu and things related to Yu Fu. He opened the porcelain bottle. The green balls of medicine had disappeared at some point, and all that remained was the heavy scent of medicine. When the fragrance entered his lungs, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. His body slumped against the table, as he passed out and slid down to the ground. Chapter 300 Your reaction was too slow, Part 2. When the report from the border reached Eastern Ling's court, the officials were shocked. Qin Wushang's methods were too vile. Looking through the history books, only the notorious Butcher General, Bai Qi, could be comparable. One slaughtered 400,000 soldiers, and one reduced a perfectly good patch of land into a barren wasteland. Emperor Ning was furious. After his anger subsided, he felt regret. Back then, he should have locked Qin Wushang inside Eastern Ling or just had him executed. If not for his excessive soft-heartedness, he would not have lost tens of thousands of troops. Tens of thousands of the Gu family's soldiers represented generations of hard work, and they were all loyal souls. For all of them to die to Qin Wushang's poison without any chance of fighting back. No matter how he thought about it, he would just sigh. Imperial Censor Ji Daogong was waiting for him below. Standing next to him was Imperial Censor Qin, who had already been added to the cabinet. Recently, he had been referring to him as Senior Cabinet Minister Qin. The two old officials stood below and exchanged a glance. They could clearly see the regret in Emperor Ning's eyes. Senior Cabinet Minister Qin stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is not the time for regret. Marquis Gu's letter requested assistance from the Ministry of Revenue in acquiring supplies for antidotes. With Princess Zhenjiang at the border, the antidote might be able to counter the poison in the ground and water. Emperor Ning slowly nodded. Have the Ministry of Revenue handle this matter as soon as possible. The Ministry of War will coordinate with them. Regardless of how much medicine they need, we must do everything possible to alleviate the poison affecting the land and water. Once the poison spreads to the surrounding cities, it won't just be the soldiers of the Gu family's army that will suffer. Senior Cabinet Minister Qin nodded. This old subject will immediately go and take care of this matter. There is another matter. Many in the Gu family's army have died or been injured, but Western Kuan's army has shown no intention of retreating. Does Your Majesty plan to send reinforcements? Emperor Ning thought about it for a moment, then waved his hand. There's no need for that. Marquis Gu is steady in his handling of things. If he needed reinforcements, he would definitely have told us. If he didn't say it, there's no need for us to think about it. We should have the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Revenue think about military supplies, the Ministry of Internal Affairs too. Having the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Revenue worry about military supplies made sense to Senior Cabinet Minister Qin, but why include the Ministry of Internal Affairs? Just as he was about to ask, Ji Daogong, who had been quietly standing to the side, gave him a look. Senior Cabinet Minister Qin cupped his hands and gave up on the question. After a moment of thought, he said, yes, even if the poison afflicting the soldiers has been treated, they will still be weakened. Lord Marquis Gu and the other generals have much hardship to endure. This subject will inform the Ministry of War and Ministry of Revenue to send some good food, and this subject will inform the Board of Internal Affairs to prepare some things that Princess Zhenjiang might need. Emperor Ning nodded, feeling very satisfied with his understanding of the situation. There was not much else for him to add. The two old officials left the imperial study and walked along the winding corridor to leave the palace, chatting along the way. The two were colleagues who had worked together in the imperial censorate for many years, thus there was a tacit understanding between the two. Senior Cabinet Minister Chen said, "Thank you, old G, for the reminder earlier. If not for your reminder, this lowly official would have almost forgotten about Princess Zhenjiang." Speaking of the crisis at the border being resolved, it was entirely thanks to the princess' hard work that we could reverse the situation. Ji Daogong did not claim any credit for this. What are you saying? The cabinet has not yet been filled out, and the ranking has not yet been decided. Senior Cabinet Minister Chen has had many things to worry about with the cabinet, so it's inevitable that you would forget about some things. On the other hand, while the cabinet's assistant, Senior Cabinet Minister Chen is now a first-rank official. There's no need to refer to yourself as a lowly official. Ji Daogong held Senior Cabinet Minister Chen in high regard. Having worked in 2 different courts and lived past the age of 70, Ji Daogong had a keen awareness of the situation in court. The recent series of changes in court filled him with a feeling of dread, but the more that he felt this, the more he hoped that people who had not chosen to align themselves with any faction would be added to the cabinet. Senior Cabinet Minister Chen's brow twitched upon hearing assistants being mentioned, as he seemed to realize something. He cupped his hands toward Ji Daogong. This lowly official has worked in the imperial censorate for many years and has always held Lord Ji in high esteem. To have been praised by Lord Ji, this lowly official will work cautiously and tirelessly to help His Majesty. Ji Daogong faintly smiled, a look of wisdom and clarity that came from age shone through his gentle gaze. The two continued forward. When the cabinet was first conceived, His Majesty had already completely pushed Prime Minister Yin Shuo to the side. He had neither the intention of adding him to the cabinet, nor did he have any plans for dissolving the position of Prime Minister. But since ancient times, there was no precedent of having both a cabinet and a Prime Minister at the same time. Ji Daogong's words had a profound meaning, and Senior Cabinet Minister Chen thought for a long time before saying, "That is indeed true." His Majesty clearly knows that the cabinet has just been created and does not have standard procedures for many things, yet he would still rather leave matters to the cabinet than allow Prime Minister Yin to interfere. This is especially true when it concerns matters related to the Gu family's army. It seems that His Majesty is really trying to avoid Prime Minister Yin. Ji Daogong said, "Yin Shuo's authority as the Prime Minister has also been reduced, but his position as a husband of the imperial family is very real. I heard that Princess Danyang was initially very displeased with her husband, but they now seem to be joined at the hip." Senior Cabinet Minister Chen must be careful and not allow that person an opportunity to get into the cabinet at a time like this. Senior Cabinet Minister Chen stopped in his tracks and wondered if he had misunderstood Ji Daogong's words. He was warning him that Yin Shuo would take advantage of this time when the cabinet had not yet established itself in court to do something to the cabinet ministers. The Yin family had worked for the country for generations, and they were now married to the imperial family. With additional help from the second prince, such a thing would not be impossible. Senior Cabinet Minister Chen immediately thought of the domineering eldest son from his own family. If any of his enemies in court wanted to do anything to him, the first person they would seek out would be Qin Chuxiu. Just as he was about to thank Ji Daogong, he raised his head and found that the old man had already walked far away. Looking at him like this, he had some of the deity of medicine, Sun Qi's, aloofness. "Has the young sir come back?" Upon returning to his manor, Senior Cabinet Minister Qin immediately looked for Qin Chuxiu. A servant stepped forward to reply, "The young sir went horse riding with the younger sons of other prominent families. He said that he will be back before the sun sets." "Master, please do not worry." He's always going out with the younger children of Marquis Gong's family. They don't need to succeed their families and will be taken care of by their father and elder brothers. Can he do the same?" Though he is young, he is my only son. After I have passed away, he will need to shoulder the burden of supporting the family, so how can he waste all of his time betting on cockfights and horse races with them? Senior Cabinet Minister Chin usually put up with his antics, but after hearing the usually silent Lord Ji personally give him some advice, he felt extremely uneasy. He became worried that Chin Chuxiu would do something improper outside. The servant consoled him, saying, "Master, don't get angry. The young sir does play around a little, but is it not just because he is still young? After he gets a few years older, he will naturally calm down. Moreover, while the young sir has gone out to play, he hasn't caused any major problems, right? It would be too late if he did cause a big problem. Others haven't done anything to him to give me face. My status cannot be considered particularly noble, but who in the capital doesn't know that I dote on my son? Now that my status has become something that others might covet, I fear that the people who previously did not dare do anything to him will now seek him out." The servant was stunned. Master has recently become the senior cabinet minister, a first-rank official. Who would dare to think of doing anything to the young master? Senior cabinet minister Chin let out a sigh. "I am not the only first-rank official in court, nor am I the only one with a position equivalent to a first-rank official. Quickly, send some more people to go and find the young sir and bring him back." The servant immediately bowed. Yes, this servant will immediately send people out. There were many racecourses in the city's outskirts. There were those visited by the commoners and those visited by nobles. If a group of young sirs went out together, and some of the group was part of the imperial family, it was also possible that they would be at an imperial racecourse. The Qin Manor's servants split up to look for Qin Chuxiu at the various racecourses. Wave after wave of servants returned to report that they could not find Qin Chuxiu. Senior Cabinet Minister Qin was anxious. At first, he wanted to give Qin Chuxiu a beating after he came back to have him not dare to casually go out during this time. Now, he was just hoping that he was still in one piece. He only had this one son, so he absolutely could not allow him to fall into the hands of some villain. Just as the sky was starting to darken, the sound of whistling came from the front gate. Qin Chuxiu swaggered into the manor with his jacket draped over his arm. Upon entering the gate, he saw a wooden armchair placed in the middle of the yard, and Senior Cabinet Minister Qin was sitting upright on it. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. This was bad. This was the bearing of someone who was about to beat his son. Qin Chuxiu noticed that the situation was dire and started to slink off when he suddenly heard a loud shout come from behind, "Come back!" He could escape the monk but not the temple. Regardless, he would need to endure a scolding, thus he may as well allow the old man to vent right now to avoid some sort of problem arising from holding it in. Senior Cabinet Minister Qin walked over to him with his hands behind his back. "Where did you go?" "I went to Ningxian's manor to visit that princess from Western Kuan." "How many times have I told you that you are not to mention his name directly? He is a member of the imperial family of the same generation as His Majesty. Even the princes and princesses must respectfully call him imperial uncle, so how can you be so casual and speak to him without any consideration for the difference in generations?" Senior Cabinet Minister Qin continued his rant. "You two get along well, so it's fine if you call him that in private. Why is it that you told the manor's servants that you were going out with the younger sons of prominent families to the racetracks? Did you know that father sent people to all of the racetracks around the city to look for you, and I very nearly ordered them to start digging?" Qin Chuxiu said, "We initially planned to go to the racetrack, but who knew that the fifth son from Uncle Wei Yuan's family, the one we nicknamed Slug, would be so bad at horse riding. On our way over, he ran into 2 oil barrels belonging to an oil seller. Knocking over 2 barrels of oil isn't a big problem, but that damn Slug wasn't willing to pay them, and he even blamed them for blocking the road. Son does not wish to associate with such a petty person, so I turned around and went to Ningxian's manor. It turned out that such a thing happened. Senior Cabinet Minister Chin saw that he safely returned, and half of the anger quickly dissipated. Seeing that his son had a clear sense of right and wrong, most of his remaining anger was also quelled. He asked, "You left just like that?" Chen Chuxiu said, "No, before I left, I gave the oil seller a silver ingot as recompense for the oil. I also asked him to clean up the spilled oil to keep others from slipping on the oil patch and getting hurt. While you were at it." Chen Chuxiu dryly chuckled. While he was at it, he cussed out the fifth young sir of Uncle Wei Yuan's family, but it would be best for him to not tell his dad, or the anger that he had worked so hard to quell would immediately surge back up again. "It's nothing. I just bought some of the pastries that the madam liked the most from Yushan Building. After that, I went to visit the couple." Hearing that he did not cause any trouble, Senior Cabinet Minister Chen's expression relaxed. "You still have some sensibility. Father does not want you to associate with those unrestrained young sirs for fear of you learning their bad habits. Father can feel at ease knowing that you have a proper sense of right and wrong." He brought his hands out from behind his back, and Chen Chuxiu's eye twitched, as he subconsciously dodged back. After a quick look, he noticed that his hands were empty, holding neither a paddle nor a whip. "Dad, you scared me to death. I thought that you were going to give me a beating." "You're still afraid of being given a beating?" Senior Cabinet Minister Chin raised his voice, but after a bit of thought, he lowered his voice again. "You must be hungry after spending the day out, right? Let's eat first. After you've finished eating, Father has something to tell you." Chen Chuxiu affectionately grabbed his arm. "Yes, son will help you inside to eat." As a troublemaker and hooligan, his ability to cause trouble outside was first-rate, but his ability to act coquettish when he got home was even better. While Senior Cabinet Minister Chin did not say it, he felt very joyous. While they walked, he asked him about Uncle Ning's manner, and Chen Chuxiu answered every question. Senior Cabinet Minister Chin said, "When making friends, treat it like looking for a mentor. In the past, Father was afraid that you would cause trouble and advised you to not get too close to him. First, he is a member of the imperial family, and his father is His Majesty's imperial uncle. If you caused trouble, not even Father would be able to protect you. Second, he has married the princess from Western Kuan, which makes his situation even more sensitive, and Father is afraid that you might cause trouble. But in recent days, that princess from Western Kuan has a proper sense of morals. After Ning Xian got married, he has started working in court and has settled down. It's almost as if his previous wanton attitude was fake, and he simply didn't want to get serious. It's fine for you to hang out with this sort of friend more often." Chen Chuxiu did not even bother raising his head. Yes, son has been learning from him this entire time." "Dad, be careful for the step." Over the course of the meal, Senior Cabinet Minister Chen thought for a long time about whether or not he should tell Chen Chuxiu about the situation in court. If he told him, he might not understand because he was still young, and it would not be good if word got out. If he did not tell him, based on his unrestrained personality, he might not be so obedient. After much consideration, Senior Cabinet Minister Chin decided to reveal part of the situation while concealing the rest. "Sure, Father's position in court has seen some change in recent days. This sort of change might look like a favor to others, but it will also attract the hatred and envy of others. Dad knows that you don't understand, but that's fine. Father just wants to tell you that it would be best if you didn't go out for a while and obediently stayed in the manor. Dad is saying that someone doesn't want the cabinet to be formed and will try to get at you by going after son." "Is that it?" Senior Cabinet Minister Chin was stunned, never expecting his unrestrained son to actually understand the situation so clearly. He spent his days gambling and playing around. How could he know about these court matters? Chen Chuxiu put down his chopsticks and looked at him with a smile. "Dad, your reaction is too slow. The person you were worried about already made his move against Sun long ago. Chapter 3011 Cut 2 Lives, Part 3, Report. The scouts have reported that the poisoned soldiers from the Gu family's army have already been cured and are currently recovering. When the report reached Western Kuan's army camp, regardless of whether it was the Lu family's army that had suffered massive casualties or the Wang family's army that had just arrived, everyone was displeased with Kuan Wushang. They initially thought that he had inherited the knowledge of Immortals Valley and reached the peak of poison techniques. The Gu family's army lost tens of thousands of troops, and this battle was sure to be a victory. Who knew that at the most critical moment, he would suddenly fall apart and watch the chance to strike past them by? Now, everything was just great. The Gu family's army had found a way to treat the poison, and by the time that they regained their morale, it would be even harder to take Zhuguan. The main tent remained closed for 5 days, with Kuan Wushang remaining completely unseen during this time. None of the guards stationed outside the tent gave face to anyone. The army's generals almost started to wonder whether or not Kuan Wushang was still at the camp. He managed to kill tens of thousands of the Gu family's army soldiers without losing a single man. The morale that he had built up with his contributions was now unbelievably low. Unfortunately, he could not allow anyone to know the reason for his disappearance. It was likely that there was someone from the Crown Prince's camp keeping an eye on things. If he found out that he had been poisoned, he would definitely take the chance to act against him. At best, morale would be lost, while in the worst-case scenario, he would fall just short of success despite the atrocities that he had committed. He could not give anyone an opening. He had no choice but to isolate himself inside the main tent, flipping through medical texts and inspecting the medicine bottle that Yu Fu had given him to try and find a way to cure the poison. It was only on the 5th day that he finally made some progress. After taking the medicine that he had made to treat the poison, he went outside to breathe in some fresh air. It had been raining too heavily during the previous days, so he felt a little hot under the morning sun. He removed his outer layer and carried it in his hand. When he arrived at the granary, he saw 2 soldiers laying on the ground. One of the soldiers heard his footsteps and opened an eye before quickly closing it and going back to sleep. Kuan Wushang looked down at himself. Having removed his outer robe, the inner clothes were white, closely resembling the clothes that the other soldiers wore. In his sleepiness, that soldier must have just looked at his clothes and not recognized him. The head general had disappeared, and the lower generals' hearts were filled with frustration. With the lack of supervision, the soldiers were happy to slack off. They knew that the practitioners in the valley practiced something known as closed-door cultivation, thus they would privately say that Kuan Wushang had been engaged in closed-door cultivation over the past 5 days. Kuan Wushang held the blade in his hands and shot a dangerous look in the direction of the lower-ranked general. This left the latter feeling weak at the knees. The sword in Kuan Wushang's hands shone with a cold glint, and it looked as if it could land on that lower-ranked general's neck at any moment. The lower-ranked general that had spoken rudely could not help but retreat a few steps. In an instant, Kuan Wushang raised the sword and slashed behind him, deftly cutting off the heads of the 2 kneeling sentries. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. With a single slash, he cut off 2 heads. The bystanders wore looks of horror. The other sentries that had slacked off on their duties dropped to their knees in fear, and the lower-ranked generals that had been watching the earlier situation with disdain were now trembling in fear. It was fortunate that this slash had not landed on their necks. Kuan Wushang looked around at the kneeling soldiers before his gaze finally landed on the lower-ranked generals. When I came out this morning, I saw these 2 soldiers sleeping outside the granary. It turns out that the rules have been changed while I was in quarantine, and it's now acceptable to lie down while on duty. Is that right? The lower-ranked general who had spoken rudely shrank back in fear and hastily responded with a smile, "No, of course not." These two soldiers were slacking off of their own accord. Just how important is guarding the granary, yet they actually slept outside while on duty. According to the military's rules, they should have been executed. Your Highness has done nothing wrong. Oh. It turns out that it was just these two soldiers who had been slacking off, and the rules haven't changed. While Kun Wushang spoke, he looked at the soldiers kneeling on the ground around him. They were now kowtowing even deeper than before, and it looked as if they were presenting their necks for execution. Fortunately, Kun Wushang had already lost interest in carrying out executions. He tossed the blood-soaked sword to the side and patted his hands to get rid of filth. I did indeed only see the two of them, and I hope that it won't happen again. The soldiers kneeling on the ground let out sighs of relief, while the lower-ranked generals exchanged hesitant glances. Kun Wushang knew what they wanted to ask him. 5 days ago was the best time for us to launch an attack of Eastern Ling. Unfortunately, I was poisoned at that time. Everyone was shocked. Nobody expected that Kun Wushang's self-isolation would be because he had been poisoned. It was fortunate that he now had the spare energy to come out and wander around. He even decapitated 2 people, so it seemed that there were no major problems. He continued, at the time, I hid it from everyone because I did not have a way to treat the poison, and I feared that my health would disturb the army's morale. Fortunately, I was finally able to come up with a cure for the poison. Going forward, we will be able to go on the offensive at any time. One of the lower-ranked generals said, in any case, 7th Prince spent many years learning in Immortals Valley, so what sort of ferocious poison would take your Highness 5 days to find a cure to? Kun Wushang laughed and pointed across the camp in the direction of Zhu Mountain. Its lofty peaks reached into the skies, but the soldiers did not see anything aside from this. What was the meaning behind pointing in that direction? Kun Wushang said, it's not Zhu Mountain. It's the Gu family's military camp behind Zhu Mountain. Did you really think that normal military doctors would be able to cure one of Immortals Valley's secret poisons? He slightly squinted his eyes, as a look of weariness that did not fit his age appeared on his face. My little senior disciple has arrived. Gu Huaijiang had adopted the girl who had inherited Immortals Valley's knowledge, and he had engaged her to his own eldest son. From that moment on, Marquis Gu's manor and Immortals Valley were connected by marriage. This was something that they had heard when Kun Wushang had instructed them to block the path to Immortals Valley. The little senior disciple that Kun Wushang had just mentioned was naturally Eastern Ling's Princess Zhenjiang, also known as the future young madam of the Gu family's army. Some people did not understand and said, Your Highness poisoned the Gu family's army by relying on consecutive days of heavy rain to wash the poison down from a higher point, and a large amount of poison was washed into Eastern Ling. But during the past few days, it's been sunny. When did your little senior disciple poison you? It would have been impossible for a little girl to sneak into Western Kun's camp and poison Kun Wushang, right? Kun Wushang's expression immediately became complicated. After a moment of silence, he quietly said, because she is no longer the Yu Fu from when she was little, and I am no longer the me from when I was young. What did your Highness say? His voice was too quiet, and nobody could hear it. Kun Wushang regained his composure and returned to his usual expression. I said that all generals of 5th rank or higher are to go to the main tent immediately. If there is anyone who had not shown up after a stick of incense has finished burning, don't blame this prince for being ruthless. Chapter 302 A Rare Show of Willfulness from Her. Part 1. Most of the soldiers in the Gu family's army that had been poisoned had now recovered, and Western Kun's army had recovered from its laziness. The 2 tigers who had met in the forest took a nap at the same time, and a gust of wind woke them both at the same time. Baring their fangs at each other, another battle was about to begin. Inside the main tent of the Gu family's army, all personnel were present. Gu Huaijiang had Gu Shubai use the terrain map to explain what the two of them had discussed the previous night. He just sat to the side with a cup of tea, showing that he had complete faith in Gu Shubai. The other generals present also had faith in this young general. He had already won battles on his own. Compared to the relatively green Gu Jiugu, he was far steadier. Based on reports from the scouts, Kun Wushang has already recovered from the poison and is currently preparing his army for their next attack. They missed out on an opportunity, and Kun Wushang will definitely place even more emphasis on this next offensive to regain some face. What they need now is a quick victory to regain their morale. They will then try to go for a bigger victory. That's why Father and I believe that he will choose to attack Changchuan or Weizhou. These two places are not as well defended as Zhuguan. Even if they are unable to take them immediately, they will not suffer too many losses. Lao Jin immediately said, "Didn't head general say before that the enemy army will view Zhuguan as the main battlefield? Why has that changed?" Gu Shubai glanced at Gu Huaijiang, and the latter nodded. Gu Shubai then continued, "The circumstances have changed with the times. The head general of Western Kuan's army is no longer Lu Kuang. Lu Kuang had a special connection to Zhuguan, but Kun Wushang does not have such a connection. Moreover, the enemy's morale is low, so there's no benefit to launching a direct attack. Everyone found this to be reasonable, right, that Kun Wushang will definitely attack a secondary location. Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanemo were the generals responsible for defending those two cities. They just did not know whether or not Gu Huaijiang would make any adjustments in who would be sent. At practically the same time, the two looked at Gu Huaijiang, and the latter smiled. "There's no need to worry. During the previous battle, you two were unable to taste victory, and that was not because you were worse than anyone else. It was because I did not give the order and because I did not provide you with sufficient numbers. At that time, you two did very well. Once again, you two will be responsible for the two cities." The two could not help but become nervous. During the previous battle, Changchuan and Weizhou were just secondary battles, yet they had been unable to get a firm grasp on the situation. If Western Kun attacked with their main force, how would the two cities hold out? Gu Jiugu said, "Then how many additional troops does Father intend to provide us?" Gu Huaijiang looked up. "I said that I would allow you two to continue defending the two cities. When did I say that I would provide additional troops? No additional troops. Going against Western Kuan's army with the meager defenses stationed in both cities was truly like a mantis trying to stop a cart." Gu Hanemo furrowed his brow. "Father, since the poison employed by Kun Wushang has been cured, he will surely know that Yu Fu is with our army. There will no longer be any point to block the path to Immortals Valley. Will he recall the troops blocking the path to Immortals Valley?" Gu Huaijiang looked at him profoundly. There was a glimmer of approval in his eyes. Before he could respond, a soldier entered the tent to report, "Head General, the 50,000 troops from Western Kuan that were blocking the path to Immortals Valley are currently marching toward us. Estimates say that they should be able to reach Zhuguan by tomorrow morning. Speak of Cao Cao, and Cao Cao will appear." 50,000 troops added to Western Kuan's current forces would create a force that must not be underestimated. Yan Huasher cupped his hands and said, "Head General, if additional troops are not provided, once those 50,000 troops arrive, the northernmost Weizhou cannot be held." There were only 30,000 troops stationed at Weizhou. The difference in numbers was too disgusting. Gu Huaijiang did not speak and continued to shake his head. "Although the poison has been cured, the army has still lost tens of thousands of troops. We don't have enough troops to send to Weizhou. We can only stick to our previous plan." From this perspective, the burden resting on Gu Jiugu's shoulders became much heavier. Everyone felt uneasy. With Gu Huaijiang having already made his decision, it could no longer be changed. Yan Huasher simply said, "This general requests to be sent to Weizhou to aid in the defense." The second young sir is still young. No matter how skilled he might be, he cannot fight such a difficult battle. He did not feel that victory could be ascertained even if he was the one leading the troops. With such a numerical disadvantage, there was no guarantee of victory even if a deity went. Yu Fu sat behind a screen and worked on her poisons, as the smell of medicinal herbs filled the tent. This medicine had not been brought here to be ingested. It was to be inhaled. When Yu Fu was still in Immortal's Valley, Sun Qi would often have her inhale the fumes of this poison. As time passed, it would reduce the effects of the poison on the human body. Poison antidotes were too expensive, and Yu Fu only had 5. When there were hundreds of thousands of troops, she might as well not have any. Her only option was to boil the poison inside the main tent to try and protect the generals who led the troops. If Qin Wushang had one strategy involving poison, he would have a second. She made use of every idea that she could come up with and hoped that they would be able to obtain victory in battle. Hearing a commotion from the main tent, Yu Fu suddenly stopped fanning the flames under the stove and leaned forward to try and hear what was being said. With many people in the tent, it was quite normal for people to have differing viewpoints on certain topics, which would lead to arguments. What was abnormal was that it was Yan Huasher who had spoken up. He was usually very calm, and it was very rare that he would express his opinion. Yu Fu looked outside the tent, and a dark figure was standing there. Yan Zheng had surely heard his father's words. Lao Jin forcefully pulled Yan Huasher to try, gesturing for him to look at Gu Huaijiang's expression. Gu Huaijiang did not say much, only saying, "Zhougu, Hanamo, you two set out first. Return to Chongchuan and Weizhou. The enemy might attack at any moment. The two cities cannot be without their generals." Gu Zhougu and Gu Hanamo did not plan on having others risk their lives for them. Father had his own reasons for not providing them with additional troops. In this army, he was the head general first and a father second. As lower-ranked generals, they had no other choice than to listen to his orders. When Yu Fu heard that they were to leave, she immediately ran out from behind the screen. "Second brother, third brother, I'll go help you two pack your things." Yao Lan had gone missing, leaving her to fan the stove on her own. She did not even notice that there was a layer of ash on her nose. Gu Zhougu subconsciously reached out to wipe the ash from her nose with his sleeve. Gu Shubai, who was standing next to the terrain map, raised an eyebrow upon seeing this but did not say anything. The three stepped out of the main tent, and Yu Fu immediately handed the fan in her hand to Yan Jing. "Don't allow the fire behind the screen to go out. Go and help me fan it for a moment. I will be back soon." Yan Zheng was all too eager to go inside to listen to the discussion, as his neck was starting to get sore from trying to listen in from the outside. "All right, leave it to me." Like a large rabbit, he ducked into the tent. Before anyone could react, he lifted the fan in his hand and strutted behind the screen. It was as if he was not carrying a fan but a tiger tally or a treasure of similar value. Yan Huasher could not chase him out, and everyone returned to the main topic, with Gu Huaijiang saying, "Shu Bai did not finish speaking earlier. You can continue." Gu Shubai nodded and spoke to Yan Huasher. "Everyone, don't worry. Weizhou and Chongchuan will be fine. Qin Wushang's main target will remain Zhuguan." Why was the information changing from one moment to the next? Even the generals that had been with Gu Huaijiang for a long time could not understand the meaning behind Gu Shubai's words. He slowly explained, "Qin Wushang needs a quick victory, thus attacking the two side cities is the best choice. Since he can think of such a plan, it's natural that we would be able to think of it. That's why we should send troops to Weizhou and Chongchuan. Like that, would Qin Wushang not consider that we would send more troops to reinforce Weizhou and Chongchuan?" Hearing this logic, everyone finally understood. "We should do the opposite. Kuing Wushang thinks that we will send reinforcements to Weizhou and Changchuan, which would mean that there are fewer troops at Zhuguan. What need would he have to attack the two side cities after they have been reinforced? He should directly attack Zhuguan now that the numbers have been reduced. It's no wonder head general said that there's no need to send additional troops to the two cities, even allowing the second young sir and third young sir to risk their lives. It turned out, Yan Huasher could not bring himself to continue, visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. He could imagine that Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanamo were currently rushing to the two cities while embracing the possibility of death. They would then be unable to sleep at night while thinking about how to deal with the enemy. In the end, they would discover that their efforts would be completely wasted, for the enemy had not even gone to where they were. This time, Ruff would not even begin to describe it. Gu Shubai observed everyone's expressions. They all felt some displeasure for Gu Huaijiang's willingness to deceive his children but did not dare voice it. They just quietly felt sorry for Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanamo. He quietly coughed. There's no need for everyone to worry about second brother and third brother. In truth, during my first year of following father onto the battlefield, father also trained me in this way. The benefit to this sort of training was that it taught him critical thinking and analysis rather than listening to his father's orders for every little thing and not knowing why he was doing them. The latter's teachings raised lower-ranked generals who could lead soldiers on the battlefield, while the former raised generals capable of directing entire armies. It might be that Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanamo currently did not understand father's methods, but they would quickly realize the benefits of this sort of training later on. Gu Shubai's words reminded everyone, and Lao Jin let out a laugh. I've remembered. When young general was 17 when he first came to the battlefield, and Gu Shubai smiled and faintly looked at him. Who would want to have the dark history from youth dredged up to be laughed at? Lao Jin's smile quickly disappeared, as he lowered his head and acted as if he had not said anything. He silently complained to himself that the children raised by the head general were all like the head general. They looked gentle like scholars, but as long as they looked at anyone with a smile, their imposing bearing would become overpowering. Gu Shubai was like this, and even little Yu Fu was like this. He then heard Yan Huasher say that this was the difference between scholarly generals and murderous generals. The former conquers with virtue, while the latter conquers with overwhelming force. Feeling satisfied, Gu Shubai retracted his gaze. As the young general of the Gu family's army, he at least had this much power. Then let's continue our discussion. Zhuguan will once again be the site of the main battle, so let's talk about the strategies and formations. Yu Fu followed Gu Jiugu and Gu Hanamo back to their tent. She said that she was going to help them pack their things, but there really was no need for that. The two of them had practically not touched their things. They were still in the same condition as when they had left the capital. This was to allow them to quickly move to a different battlefield. Yu Fu took a look and found that the two of them had one chest each. She awkwardly waved her hand, having the soldiers behind her bring out the things that she had prepared for them. 1, 2, 3. There were a total of 4 bundles, and they were all very full. There seemed to be quite a large quantity of items. Yu Fu handed them to the two. These contain medicinal herbs. I don't dare say that they are medicines that are useful against all poisons, but they should be able to reduce the effects of the poison until I arrive. She stuffed a bundle of medicinal herbs into each of their hands. Gu Jiugu accepted it with a smile, but Gu Hanamo, who usually remained silent, furrowed his brow. Yu Fu, could you not have turned these into small pills like the ones that exist in plays? If we were ambushed by the enemy and pursued into the night, how could we light a fire to prepare the medicine? Yu Fu froze. Right, how could she not have thought of this? For her to forget about such a simple method, it had to be a result of her having had no time to rest since arriving at Zhuguan. It was too late to go and prepare the pills now. Yu Fu looked at him unhappily. If there's really no time to prepare the medicine, just chew on it and swallow it. Also, she revealed a teasing smile, didn't third brother absolutely detest watching plays? This time, it was Gu Hanmo's turn to feel awkward. The matter involving Yu Guan was indeed something that he had mishandled, and Yu Fu often used it to make fun of him. She picked up the other 2 bundles and gave one to each. These have pastries and jerky. They were brought here from the capital by the people transporting rations from the capital. Gu Jiugu opened one up slightly, and the pastries all looked like ones made in Yushan building. It was immediately clear that they had not been prepared for the soldiers. These were sent by His Majesty for you, right? I heard the soldiers say that His Majesty sent you many things that a princess should have for fear of you suffering at the border region. You should keep these for yourself. We aren't picky eaters. I don't care. I don't care. I want to give them to you. Yu Fu was putting on a rare display of willfulness. After giving the 2 of them the things that she had prepared, she felt a little more at ease. The 2 suddenly understood that Yu Fu was worried that the 2 of them would be in danger after hearing the situation faced by the 2 armies. She also understood that Gu Huaijiang's orders could not be changed, thus this was the only way in which she could express her concern. In the end, she was still just a young girl who had not yet come of age. She really was put in a difficult position. Gu Jiugu looked at the top of her head and could not hold back a faint smile. Chapter 303 A Sad Beauty on a Swing, Part 2, The autumn winds blew, and the days in Linen grew colder and colder. Since ancient times, the arrival of autumn has been sad and lonesome. For the women of nobility, this was especially true, as the girls of the Prime Minister's manor wore worried expressions. A girl in white clothes sat on a swing set, her body swaying and sleeves fluttering in the wind. She had a gauze the same color as her clothes wrapped around her head. Just looking at a glance, one might think that she was in mourning, but upon closer inspection, it was a gauze that dressed a wound. Yin Jiao raised her hand and felt the cloth on her forehead. The wound had already healed. This gauze wrap did not cover a wound. Instead, it covered a folk remedy to get rid of scars that Peyer had found. It was a herbal medicine with no name. After it was ground to a paste, it was administered on the scar then secured with the cloth. Peyer said that this would be able to get rid of the scar on her forehead. Yin Shua was unwilling to bring an imperial physician in to write a prescription for her, thus she could only try to treat it with any medicine that she could find. She did not ask that the medicine completely get rid of the scar, but she hoped that it would at least be less conspicuous. The swing creaked and started to sway more. In a daze, she looked up. It's getting windy. Peyer came out from inside the room with a cloak in hand and draped it over her shoulders. Young miss, how about you come inside and stop sitting on the swing? Just listen to the creaking sound. How frightening is that? Just listening to it made her skin crawl. She was afraid that if Yin Jiao continued to sit on the swing, she might suddenly fall. What would she do then? Her gaze landed on Yin Jiao's forehead. The previous wound only just healed, and the scar has not yet disappeared. If anything were to happen to young miss, what sort of explanation should Peyer give to the previous master, who has returned to being a commoner? Peyer only brought up Yin Yen and did not bring up Yin Shuo. She also knew that Yin Shuo did not care whether she lived or died. Yin Jiao faintly smiled, don't worry. I won't swing very high. Even if I fall, it will just be a short fall. It will be fine. Peyer knew that she liked swinging on the swing, thus she said, then this servant will go and have the steward bring someone in to fix it. This swing has been through lightning, thunder, and heavy rains. The inside will have corroded quite a bit. Young miss, let's get it fixed up first. After saying this, she turned around to leave, but Yin Jiao grabbed her arm. Why bother attracting more attention? You already know who is in charge of the manor. Eldest brother does not like me, so who else would care whether I lived or died? Even if you went, you would just be met with ridicule. It's pointless. Tapping her toes on the ground, she quickly steadied the swing, then slowly stood up. Forget it. Let's go inside. Remove the gauze from my head. I want to see how the scar is healing. She had already been using this medicine for 7 or 8 days, with Pear applying it every day. Surely, there should already be some results. Pear supported her as she walked into the room. Yes, this will also be the perfect time to reapply the medicine. When this servant went out to buy this medicine, the one selling it told this servant that the scar would definitely disappear without a trace after half a month. Yin Jiao's expression immediately improved. It will disappear without a trace after half a month. Checking on it now, it will have at least partially disappeared, right? A swing inside the courtyard, a pedestrian passes by outside, laughter fills the courtyard. The daughters of aristocrats had many idle hours during the day, and they liked swinging on swings to deal with the boredom. The eastern courtyard also had such a swing, and it was a little taller and larger than the one in Yin Jiao's courtyard. When it swung, there was no creaking sound. The beauty on this swing also wore a worried expression. 3 months had passed since the wedding, but Princess Danyang and Yin Shuo still slept in separate rooms. The grannies and palace maids that had accompanied her out were all extremely anxious. Princess Danyang did not say it, but she was also very worried. She just swung back and forth while feeling completely lost. It was clear that she was the one who looked down on Yin Shuo for losing his influence. It was clear that she loved Gu Shubai and did not want to marry Yin Shuo. So why now? Was it that Yin Shuo was the one who did not want to get close to her? She looked down at herself. Her skin was a pale white, and her hands were neither thin nor fat. Her body had curves in all the right places, as she was both beautiful and sturdy. Reaching up to her cheeks, her plump face was also beautiful and full of grace. It was a different type of beauty from Yu Fu's breathtakingly beautiful face, but her beauty could not be denied. No matter how hard she thought, she just could not understand why Yin Shuo would not want to touch her. She resided in the eastern courtyard on her own, and this place provided her with the best clothing and food. Yin Shuo had never been stingy with money and would occasionally visit her to pay his respects while maintaining a gentlemanly demeanor. But once the sky darkened, he would use court work as an excuse to leave the eastern courtyard. He did not show the faintest hint of wanting to stay overnight with her. Princess Danyang started to suspect whether or not there was another girl whom Yin Shuo liked, causing him to treat her with such indifference. She sent people out to investigate, but they did not find any signs of him meeting with another girl. This made her even moodier. Princess, the osmanthus flowers in the garden have bloomed. They're so fragrant. Princess, how about we go out for a walk to stave off the boredom? Diener entered the courtyard while carrying a small basket of flowers. Princess Danyang looked at the basket. The ones that have bloomed are quite nice, but what have you picked those for? Diener smiled and said, this servant heard the servant say that Princess' husband likes eating osmanthus pastries. Doesn't Princess also like osmanthus wine? This servant picked these to make them into osmanthus wine and osmanthus pastries. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. Princess Danyang slightly raised an eyebrow. She did not expect that both she and Yin Shuo would like osmanthuses. He also likes osmanthuses. You said that the osmanthuses are in the garden. Do you think that my husband would want to go and see the osmanthuses in the garden? Diener paused. This servant did not see Princess' husband in the garden, but once Princess' husband has finished his work, he might visit the garden. Princess Danyang immediately hopped off the swing with a look of joy on her face. Come, quickly help this princess get changed. Let's go to the garden to admire the osmanthus flowers. Before they could reach the garden, they suddenly heard the sound of porcelain shattering from a courtyard nearby. Diener and some other palace maids could not be more familiar with this sound, and they subconsciously shrank back slightly before they realized that the one smashing cups and plates was not Princess Danyang. She quietly glanced at Princess Danyang, and the latter did not argue. Whose courtyard is this? Who's smashing things in here? Very quickly, someone came out from the courtyard to receive them. It was an old woman, replying to Princess, "This is our manor's young Miss courtyard." Since it was Yin Jiao's courtyard, the only one who would dare to throw a tantrum and smash things would be Yin Jiao herself. Princess Danyang was a little surprised. Ever since she came to the manor, she very rarely saw Yin Jiao. Yin Shuao's younger sister was a talented and gentle girl. How could she throw a tantrum and smash things like she did? She became a little curious. Either way, there's not much to do, so this princess will go and visit your young miss. Yin Jiao's bed chamber was a mess, the floor completely covered in shattered porcelain. There was just one maidservant kneeling in the room, her thin shoulders slightly trembling. Yin Jiao had her back to the door, as she sat in front of the dresser. With her white clothes and hair loose, she looked a bit like a ghoul. Despite hearing footsteps at the door, she did not turn around. Princess Danyang furrowed her brow with displeasure, and Diener quickly noticed, "Young Miss Yin, our princess came to visit you." Yin Jiao still did not respond. Just as Diener was about to scold her, Princess Danyang stopped her and walked toward the dresser. "Jiao, what happened? Can you not tell sister-in-law?" While she spoke, she approached Yin Jiao. When she was 5 paces away from the dresser, she suddenly stopped. From this angle, she could clearly see Yin Jiao's reflection in the bronze mirror. Her beautiful and thin face fit the typical model of a gentle beauty. She was the opposite of Princess Danyang's style of beauty, but it was graceful and not showy. It was just that there was a particularly conspicuous black scar on her forehead. It was as if a young child had drawn on her forehead with ink. Naturally, Princess Danyang knew that there were no young children in the Prime Minister's manor. There also would not be any young children who would dare to draw on the face of an eldest young miss from a prominent family. "You! How did your injury end up like this?" Princess Danyang covered her mouth in shock, as she looked at Yin Jiao in the bronze mirror. "When I saw you last time, your wound was not this serious. It's already been 3 months. How could it deteriorate to such a degree?" When the palace maids heard her voice, they came in to support her. Seeing the dark patch on Yin Jiao's face, they were scared witless. With her white clothes, messy hair, and empty eyes, Yin Jiao truly looked like a ghoul. Kneeling on the ground, Payer kowtowed, "It's all this servant's fault. It's all this servant's fault." This servant believed a folk doctor's remedy and went to get the medicine for young miss. Who knew that young miss' wound would get even worse? "It's all this servant's fault. Princess, please save young miss." Chapter 304 Fragrance of Osmanthus, Part 3. A white cloth stained with a green medicinal paste lay before Princess Danyang. This must be the folk remedy that the maidservant had mentioned. Princess Danyang looked at Payer with displeasure. "Impudence. Do you not know how important an unmarried girl's face is? Rather than obediently following an imperial physician's prescription, why did you search for a folk remedy? If your young miss face never recovers, how many lives would it take to pay that back?" Payer kowtowed while crying, and she continued kowtowing until her forehead started bleeding. "Princess, please understand. If an imperial physician wrote a prescription for young miss, this servant would rather die than go looking for a folk remedy." Princess Danyang was perplexed. That's quite the puzzling thing to say. Is the dignified Prime Minister's manor unable to invite an imperial physician? Payer just cried and kowtowed, not daring to respond. Yin Jiao's expression slightly changed. Her lips parted for a moment, but she did not say a word. Diener could see the untouched food on the table and took a look. There were 2 dishes and a soup, and they were all made of radishes and lettuce. There was not the slightest sign of oil. How could the darling daughter of the dignified Prime Minister's manor eat such unseemly foods? What exactly is going on here? She pointed at the dishes on the table, jutting her chin in the direction of Pear. If you want your young Miss face to recover properly, provide this princess with an honest answer, otherwise, nobody will be able to save your young miss. With her face covered in tears, Pear looked up at Princess Danyang with extremely conflicted feelings. Should she offend the eldest young sir by revealing the truth to her, or should she just watch Yin Jiao's beauty slowly get ruined? Yin Jiao's beauty getting ruined was also partially a result of her mistake in believing a folk remedy. She kowtowed 3 more times, "Princess, please save our young miss. Young miss did something wrong and offended the eldest young sir." In his anger, the eldest young sir refused to invite an imperial physician in to treat the young miss. But young miss is the young miss of the Prime Minister's manor. "Princess, please be merciful." The words coming from Pear were roughly what she had expected. Who in the Prime Minister's manor, aside from Yin Shuo, would dare to mistreat Yin Jiao? How could Yin Shuo be so fierce, not even caring about his own little sister's face being ruined? What exactly had Yin Jiao done to make him act like this? It was likely that she would not get a clear answer from the maidservant. She would need to ask Yin Jiao. Princess Danyang turned around and looked at Yin Jiao. "In the end, I am your sister-in-law. Did you not consider telling me?" Yin Jiao bit her lower lip and hesitated about whether or not she should tell Princess Danyang the truth. This matter did not just concern Yin Shuo's interests. More importantly, it concerned the entire Yin family's interests in court. It might not be proper to tell Princess Danyang. But Princess Danyang was the only one who could help her and invite an imperial physician to treat her scar. She might be the only one who could help her face heal. She could not allow her face to become ruined. Gu Zhougu would not like a girl whose face was ruined. Yin Jiao said, "If I tell you the truth, you will invite an imperial physician to treat me. Is that right?" Princess Danyang nodded. "You can now be considered my little sister. If your face is ruined, my face will also lose its luster. Isn't that right?" She took a deep breath. "All right, then I will tell you, eldest sister-in-law." Princess Danyang left Yin Jiao's courtyard and gave Diener an order. "Immediately take care of my orders. Go into the palace and invite the imperial physician who is specialized in getting rid of scars. I'll be going to the outer study. There's no need for you to accompany me." Diener said, "This servant will go and give the order. Does Princess not want anyone to accompany you? How about we have Yuner and the others go to the outer study with Princess?" "No need." Princess Danyang thought back to what Yin Jiao just said. "This is a big matter, so it would not be good for there to be too many people to come with me. You go ahead. I will go look for my husband on my own." She had gained such useful information on Yin Shuo. She absolutely had to make good use of it. It would be best if she could take advantage of this opportunity to attract Yin Shuo's attention over to her in order to live the normal life a married woman should live. Princess Danyang went to the outer study on her own, but the servant standing guard outside stopped her. "Princess, did Princess come to see the eldest young sir?" Princess Danyang said, "That's right. Doesn't he spend all day in the outer study?" The servant respectfully said, "Indeed, the eldest young sir usually spends his days in the outer study, but he just went out. He said that he was going to take a walk in the garden." Princess Danyang started walking into the outer study and said, "Then I'll wait for him inside the study." "Princess, you absolutely must not. In this manner, without permission from the eldest young sir, nobody is allowed in." The servant looked respectful, but he moved to block her path without any hesitation. The study contains materials pertaining to court work and many other official documents. Eastern Ling's laws dictate that women are not permitted to take part. Princess, please leave the study. She did not particularly want to go in. It was just that the more she was stopped, the more her pride did not allow her to leave so easily. If this princess insists on entering, what of it? The servant's expression did not change. There is no such possibility. Princess is not able to go in. She really wanted to keep the earlier Inshua, the Inshua who was smiling gently and who carefully stored an osmanthus flower. She did not want the one in front of her now, where the smile did not reach his eyes. This subject did not know that Princess came and failed to welcome you. Princess, please do not get angry. Princess Danyang suddenly became irritated. Does husband need to treat me so distantly? Inshua was a little surprised and let out a strange laugh. Has Princess forgotten what you said to me during the spring banquet? Princess would not marry someone as lacking as this subject. Even if we were to get married, Princess would never treat me well and would have this subject to die young. Princess Danyang's expression changed. She never thought that he would be so petty as to remember every word of what she had said. It was no wonder he stayed a respectful distance from her. It turned out that this was the reason. But this was fine. She had her own methods to have him change his mind. Back then, this princess did not understand husband and misspoke. Does husband insist on quibbling over that with this princess? Inshua cupped his hands. This subject does not dare. He said that he did not dare, not that he would not. Princess Danyang sneered to herself. She slowly walked behind Inshua and reached out for a fallen petal on his shoulder. Feigning carelessness, she said, I just came from Jiao's courtyard and heard something absolutely horrible. I heard that husband, for the sake of disrupting the formation of the cabinet, actually had his own little sister go and be a honey trap. If Father Emperor was to find out about this, I wonder what sort of reaction Father Emperor would have. Her hand slowly moved down from his shoulder, as Inshua's back tightened up, and his lips became pursed. Chapter 305 Invite the Second Prince, Part 1. If you have any conditions, just say them. Inshua did not look back. He was as stiff as a block of wood, but her fingertips did not show the slightest sign of movement. He was a young man in his early 20s who was full of vigor and had neither concubines nor servants who slept with him, so how could he be so indifferent to the beauty standing next to him? Princess Danyang pulled her hand back in disappointment, then walked back in front of Inshua. There's no need for husband to be so nervous. Before marriage, a girl obeys her father, and after marriage, she obeys her husband. Since I have already married you, how exactly do I benefit from having you get scolded by Father Emperor? No matter how noble her background, there was no precedent in Eastern Ling of women remarrying. She was destined to spend the rest of her life with Inshua. Inshua coldly repeated himself, conditions. He was actually maintaining such a stubborn position. Princess Danyang laughed. What conditions could I have? I'm just hoping that you will treat me a little better and that we can live more like a normal couple. Inshua understood her but could not help but find it funny. He did not like Princess Danyang, but for the sake of not angering Emperor Ning, he had no choice but to marry her. If Princess Danyang was willing to quietly get married to him, he would not treat her so poorly. Unfortunately, she repeatedly mocked him and made him lose face in court. If it had been any other man, they could not possibly accept this sort of wife, much less someone of Inshua's stature. His smile was a little cold, like the frosty autumn wind. Princess has a noble status, while this subject is busy with official work. That has determined that we cannot possibly have a normal married life. If Princess is dissatisfied with this subject, please have His Majesty allow us to get divorced. Divorced? Princess Danyang angrily said, This princess has been married to you for less than half a year, yet you are already thinking of getting a divorce. Could it be that you've forgotten what you said to Father Emperor on the day of our wedding? Inshuo's expression became as cold as ice. If Princess was able to forget what you said during the spring banquet, why can't this subject forget what I said on the day of our wedding? It would have been fine if she had not brought up the day of the wedding. Bringing it up was like picking at a wound in Inshuo's heart. On that day, Yu Fu told him that as long as he told Emperor Ning that he did not want to marry Princess Danyang, she would consider forgiving him and accepting him. In his dreams, he could see himself obtaining this treasure. She had offered up this olive branch, but he could not accept it. Emperor Ning sat at the top with all civil and military leaders present. Even the other members of the imperial family were present. Replying to Princess, he has already arrived. He is currently examining young Miss Yin. Does Princess want to go and take a look? She shook her head. There's no need. It's fine as long as he's here. It's too cold outside. Let's go inside to speak. It was not so cold as to require a brazier, but Diana noted just how cold her hands were. She could only pour a cup of hot tea for her. Princess, hold it in your hands. Don't rush to drink it. Princess Danyang looked at her in a daze, as the warmth of the tea slowly spread from her hands and dragged her back to the present. Diana said, Princess, what happened? Didn't you go to see your husband? Why is it that you look a little unhappy? Princess Danyang tightly held the cup of tea. It's nothing. Go to the second prince's manor for me and tell second brother to have him come and see me in the prime minister's manor when he has a chance. Chapter 306 Meet a God, Kill a God, Part 2, Make a trip to the eldest prince's manor. Just say that I have something to tell him regarding His Majesty's illness. Amidst the falling leaves, he stepped over the fallen leaves, as he took in the sweet fragrance emanating from the surrounding osmanthus trees. After the mood that he had managed to obtain from half a day of leisure had been disturbed, the melancholy filling his heart grew even more profound. It weighed on him so much that he could not breathe. The Prime Minister's manor was currently going through some troubled times. His father was not present, and he needed to support the entirety of the Prime Minister's manor and the Yin family on his own. Yin Shuo returned to the outer study, and the servant bowed to greet him then said, Princess Danyang came to the outer study earlier and said that she wanted to wait for eldest young sir inside, but this servant kept her out. The princess then said that she would go to look for eldest young sir in the garden. Did eldest young sir run into her? I did. You did very well. Regardless of whether it's Princess Danyang or anyone else, and unless father returns, nobody is allowed to take a single step inside the outer study. Yes, then this servant will go and invite the eldest prince immediately. Yin Shuo entered the study on his own, then closed the door behind him. He then closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The cabinet had been established, and there was peace on the border. It was possible that Emperor Ning would have him removed from his position of Prime Minister at any time. He hesitated and struggled with the decision for a long time, not knowing whether he should simply accept Emperor Ning's arrangements or if he should take a risk and make a plan on his own. He had spent the past few days contemplating this question, and he had not been able to make up his mind until Princess Danyang sought him out. She had gone to threaten him. He was surrounded by enemies, and Gu Huaijiang was about to win yet another major victory. Emperor Ning's trust in him compared to his trust in himself would become even greater. Because he was the husband of the second prince's younger sister, the eldest prince was happy to see him lose power. As for the second prince, he focused on himself rather than seeking to help Princess Danyang for the sake of pleasing Emperor Ning. Under these circumstances, Princess Danyang's threats were the straws that broke the camel's back. As a grown man, he could not allow himself to be bullied by an arrogant and unreasonable girl for his entire life. He would repay Princess Danyang for each and every bit of humiliation that he had suffered. Your Highness the eldest prince, someone has come from the Prime Minister's manor to invite your Highness. They said that the Prime Minister has something to tell your Highness. The eldest prince heard the servant's report and faintly smiled. He has already fallen from grace, so he should come to see this prince himself if he has something to say. He actually dares to have this prince go and seek him out. What a joke. If this had happened in the past, even if Enchanting had lost his influence, he would still be willing to go and pay him a visit. Now, however, Enchanting was the second prince's brother-in-law. Who knew what wicked plans he had in mind? Did he want to do something to harm him? The eldest prince picked up his cup of tea. Tell the person who came that this prince is busy with official matter and has no time to see him. If Prime Minister has something to tell this prince, please come and talk after court tomorrow. The palace had many people watching. Even if Enchanting wanted to harm him on the second prince's behalf, he would not be able to find an opportunity. After saying this, he brought the cup to his lips and took a sip. The servant said, "Yes, this servant will go and inform him immediately." But that person said that Prime Minister had something related to His Majesty's illness to talk about. Your Highness, are you sure that you won't see him? The eldest prince's hand trembled, and tea spilled from the cup onto his clothes. The servant was stunned to see this. Was there something wrong with what he had said? Why did the eldest prince seem so shocked that he would spill his tea? The eldest prince immediately wiped away the tea from his clothes with a handkerchief. He then secretively wiped the corners of his mouth. Did he say such a thing? He did say such a thing. Then should this servant still respond in the same manner? The eldest prince stood up from his seat. Under his calm facade, his heart was shaken by a turbulent storm. Emperor Ning's illness was a result of his instructions to Imperial Consort Xian. Could it be that Enchanting already knew about this? Regardless of whether or not Enchanting knew, this matter absolutely could not be discussed in the palace. He had no choice but to go along with Enchanting's invitation and personally visit the Prime Minister's manor. No, go and tell the person who came that ever since Prime Minister became a husband of the imperial family, this prince has not gone to visit him in his manor. No matter what is said, he is this prince's brother-in-law. It's natural that I should go and pay him a visit. His initial refusal had been very blunt, but now he was cheerfully agreeing to go. The servant did not dare to speculate as to what was at the heart of this change. He bowed then retreated. Yes, this servant will go and inform them. The eldest prince stood behind him and slowly clenched his fists, his veins bulging under his sleeves. No matter what, he could not allow the truth of what happened back then. Even if that person was the Prime Minister, he would do whatever he had to. Without any regrets. What? You said that Danyang wants me to go to the Prime Minister's manor. In the second prince's manor, Diener personally visited the second prince and responded, "Yes, Princess did indeed say this." It fell silent, and Diener raised her head to sneak a peek. She found the second prince sitting at the head of the hall with a look of annoyance on his face. It seemed that he did not want to go, but it also looked as if he was thinking about something. From his peripheral vision, he could see Diener observing his expression. Dryly coughing a couple of times, he sat up straighter. Diener was Danyang's confidant. If he revealed a look of displeasure in front of Diener, and Diener told Danyang, it would be bad if their sibling relationship collapsed. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. The second prince said, "Didn't I tell Danyang last time? Enchanting's current position in court is quite awkward. Though he is my brother-in-law, I need to stay out of trouble. The cabinet has just been established, so if I frequently visit the Prime Minister's manor, others might think that I am dissatisfied with Father Emperor's arrangements." Diener quickly pleaded her innocence. "Your Highness, please show mercy. Princess must be missing your highness to have this servant come and invite your highness. Moreover, Princess has not invited your highness to visit often. Since the wedding, you have only gone to visit once. Before Ensure had lost his majesty's favor, the second prince was exceedingly satisfied with this brother-in-law and would often visit the prime minister's manor. How could he become annoyed now that his little sister was asking him to visit just once in a while? Thinking of this, Diener lowered her head even further. The second prince thought about it and found that this was indeed the case, and his expression improved significantly. How is life for Danyang in the prime minister's manor? Ensure hasn't made her suffer, has he? He was just mindlessly asking. When a princess of the imperial family got married to a subject, which family would not treat her with the utmost respect? Ensure was also someone who had lost influence, so he would be even more unlikely to dare to mistreat Princess Danyang. Sure enough, Diener said, the prime minister's manor handles everything flawlessly. The servants are also very obedient, and there are no problems with the food or clothing. As long as Princess wants it, her husband will get it for her. There are also no elders in the manor to pay respects to. There's just a young miss who very rarely goes out, so our princess has a very relaxed life. But what is there? Diener bit her lower lip and contemplated whether or not to tell the second prince that the second prince and the princess still had not consummated their marriage. The second prince might be able to provide the princess with some fairness. But no matter how closely related the second prince was, he was still a man. She truly could not speak about the problems that women faced. The second prince saw that she was hesitating and thought that Princess Danyang had been bullied. What is it? Is there really something troubling her? If there is something, just say it. This prince will support her and help her out. Diener said, It's a matter between couples. Even if this servant was to die, I would not dare speak carelessly about it. Second prince, please ask Princess about it. Her face was bright red, and the second prince let out a surprised sound, then lovingly smiled. It's inevitable that there will be some lack of harmony between newlyweds. She should have been taught this sort of thing by a granny before she got married. This isn't anything serious. Diener knew that the second prince misunderstood but could do nothing but blush and remain silent. All right, then I will go and visit her at the prime minister's manor tomorrow to keep her from having any wild thoughts. The second prince finally agreed, and Diener retreated after bowing. She thought to herself that she would need to ask Princess Danyang what she thought and whether or not she should tell the second prince about the consummation of marriage to have him try to convince Ensure. With the second prince taking a stand, could Ensure truly have Princess Danyang continue to suffer in silence? What nonsense are you spouting? How can this sort of thing possibly be told to second brother? Princess Danyang was both embarrassed and angry at Diener for this suggestion. I did not ask second brother to come to talk about this. I have something important to tell second brother about related to the court. Diener obediently bowed, no longer daring to say a word. It was only after a long pause that Princess Danyang consoled her. All right, I know that you were doing it for my sake, but don't bring this matter up again. I am a dignified princess. Do I really need to rely on others for help in winning my husband's love? She was proud of her nobility and her beauty, thus she naturally had a way to make Ensure change his mind. Diener quietly replied, His Highness the second prince said he will come tomorrow. This servant will go and inform the servants to prepare some more of the foods that His Highness likes. Go ahead. Princess Danyang sent the palace maid off and wondered how she should tell the second prince about Ensure's attempts to bring down the cabinet. They would need to discuss a plan of action, but she could not allow the second prince to tell Emperor Ning about this. Once Emperor Ning found out about this, she would definitely suffer along with Ensure. The first thing the next morning, the eldest prince and the second prince arrived outside the prime minister's manor at the same time. Tien, the title is an idiom meaning to never give up on a task regardless the obstacles. Chapter 307 The Dragon's Loyal Subject, Part 3. With the creation of the cabinet, both the eldest prince and the second prince wanted to have a say in its formation. Unfortunately, Emperor Ning was very guarded and secretive of his selections, and none of the officials chosen were ordinary subjects. They were left with no way to interfere. It was only then that the two understood that Emperor Ning moving away from a prime minister in favor of establishing a cabinet was not just a result of his loss of faith in Yin Shuo. More importantly, he was defending himself against his two sons. The two met outside the prime minister's manor, and it was as if they had come across their bitter rival. "Oh, why has eldest brother also come?" The second prince acted as if he was part of the family. "What a coincidence, have you also come to see Danyang?" The eldest prince glanced at him and faintly smiled. "I came to see our imperial sister and our brother-in-law." What does second brother intend to say? He was reminding the second prince that Princess Danyang was also his younger sister, and Yin Shuo was also his brother-in-law. The second prince smiled. "Naturally, I don't. But I will be going to see Danyang first. She is a newlywed and has just arrived at the Prime Minister's manor. There are many things that are inconvenient for her. As siblings born from the same mother, it's natural that there would be things that she can only tell me." The eldest prince sneered. "Then you go and visit Danyang. I'll go and have a chat with Prime Minister Yin." After saying this, he walked off. The second prince was left behind, unable to understand what was going through his head. He initially thought that Ning Yizhao had come to visit Danyang for the sake of keeping up appearances and displaying his bearing as the elder brother. Who knew that mentioning that they had been born from the same mother would be enough for him to leave on his own? Could it be that he really had been planning to see Yin Shuo? With these questions in mind, the second prince followed a servant inside and headed to the eastern courtyard. Along the way, he saw that the prime minister's manor was vast. He also found that the vegetation was tended to more properly, as they approached the eastern courtyard. Even the buildings had a unique air to them. The eastern courtyard that Princess Danyang lived in was even more exquisite. Although it was not as magnificent as the imperial palace, it was still quite refined. The second prince could not help but praise it. "This place is far better than my second prince's manor. The Yin family truly has been here for many generations, as everything in the manor seems to have some history." "Danyang, what could you possibly be dissatisfied with?" Princess Danyang ordered for the palace maids to bring out the tea and snacks, then had everyone dismissed to stand guard outside. "Second brother, I asked you to come to discuss an official matter. It's not to complain about some trifles." The second prince said. "Don't be in such a rush. I need to ask you something first. Did you also invite Ning Yizhao to the manor?" Princess Danyang was stunned. "Of course not, what would I invite him for? He and second brother are bitter rivals, while second brother and I are siblings born from the same mother. How could I possibly care about him? Being polite to him is just a matter of keeping up appearances." The second prince nodded. "I ran into him when I arrived, and he said that he had come to see you and Yin Shuo, while I would be coming here to see you. He then headed off to see Yin Shuo. If you have something to say, say it quickly. After you've finished, I'll go and see what's happening with Yin Shuo's side and see what Ning Yizhao is planning." Princess Danyang cautiously looked around to verify that the windows and doors were tightly closed, then lowered her voice. "Yin Shuo has a younger sister called Yin Jiyao. Yesterday, she told me something." The eldest prince stood in the outer study and looked around. Other family studies tended to be large and bright, while the prime minister's manor study was particularly different. It was dim and gloomy. Behind the desk was a large window that was partially opened. A bit of light shone in through the window, giving the study a look as if there was a secret that must not be known hidden within. This sort of atmosphere made him feel very uncomfortable. Yin Shuo walked in and ordered the servants to bring out the tea and some snacks. "Eldest prince, please sit." Seeing that he had a strange expression, he smiled and said, "My place is very simple, and there are usually very few guests. That's why I had it arranged according to my preferences. Does your highness feel uncomfortable?" The eldest prince smiled without revealing anything. "It's fine. Prime Minister must be joking. Regardless of whether it's your esteemed father or you, as civil officials of Eastern Ling's court, how could your manners study not have many guests?" Inshuo sat down across from him. "The Prime Minister's manor is indeed a place that has many guests, but regardless of whether it's me or my father, we would not allow them into the outer study so freely. Not to mention outsiders, but not even Princess Danyang has been allowed enter after marrying into the manor." Upon hearing this, the eldest prince became pensive. He raised his head and carefully observed Inshuo. Inshuo boldly allowed him to carry out his observations. It seemed as though he did not know what he was thinking, and this continued until the eldest prince averted his gaze. He looked at the eldest prince, and the latter reservedly said, "Then would the second prince have permission to enter this study?" Their eyes met. The two were people who stood at the top of the court system, and they were currently feeling each other out. After a long while, Inshuo said, "He would not." A faint look of joy appeared in the eldest prince's eyes, but it quickly vanished. "Danyang and the second prince are born of the same mother. Has Prime Minister made a mistake with regards to who is related to whom?" Inshuo knew what he was wondering. "That's a matter of Danyang's blood relations." "How is that related to me?" "Eldest prince wouldn't think that I would possibly consider helping the elder brother of a woman who looks down on me and has humiliated me countless times, right?" The eldest prince's eye twitched. He did not expect him to be so direct. "Because Danyang humiliated you, you want to get revenge against her. That's why you don't want to help the second prince and would rather help this prince." Inshuo smiled and slightly nodded. "That is indeed the case. Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters." The eldest prince was direct. "How can I trust that you are being earnest and that this isn't some plot that you and the second prince came up with?" "When I arrived, I happened to run into the second prince. For the Prime Minister's manner to invite the both of us at the same time, what is the meaning of this?" Inshuo did not know that this had happened. After thinking for a bit, he knew that Princess Danyang had invited the second prince. His attitude yesterday had annoyed her, and she wanted to get back at him but did not dare to tell Emperor Ning about it. She had no choice but to call the second prince to discuss it. His judgment had been correct. Even if Princess Danyang had a hold of something that could be used against him, she would not dare to carelessly make use of it. Inshuo said, "I don't know anything about the second prince's matters, but I have a way to make eldest prince trust that I am being earnest and not plotting something." "What is that way?" "Based on the fact that I know the truth behind His Majesty's severe illness yet did not expose it, eldest prince should be able to trust my earnestness, right?" The eldest prince lowered his gaze and just stared at the cup of tea in his hands. After hearing what the person from the Prime Minister's manor had said the previous day, he had trouble sleeping at night. He imagined all sorts of situations where Inshuo knew about the truth of the situation and used it to reach some sort of goal. He thought all night about how to deal with the situation. Now that he was sitting in front of Inshuo, he was unable to control the uncertainty filling his heart. Through his stiff facial expression, Inshuo could see the dread in his heart. Killing emperor and father, as a prince, was the most serious accusation possible. Once the truth was revealed, the eldest prince's life would be completely ruined. After a moment of silence, Inshuo slowly said, "There's no need for eldest prince to be nervous. Since I have invited you here to discuss this matter, I have no intention of exposing you. If I was to expose you, who would help me vent?" The eldest prince kept his head down for a long time before he slowly looked up at Inshuo. The corners of his mouth twitched. "Prime Minister does not seem like the type of person to do this sort of thing." You would rather choose me over the second prince, someone who is closer to you by marriage, for the sake of getting back at some girl. Who could possibly believe such a thing? His argument had some logic behind it. If Prime Minister is such a rash person, should you not have refused the engagement when Father Emperor offered it? That he did not refuse it back then made it clear that there was a problem. Inshuo said, "Of course, it's not just to get back at some girl. However, there is also no need to consider the relations obtained through marrying her, thus there is no need for me to choose to support the second prince. I, Inshuo, am a talented and intelligent person, and I am clearly one of His Majesty's loyal subjects, so why would I have to rely on the girl who insists on trampling me underfoot?" His Majesty's loyal subject. The eldest prince's entire body trembled and was only able to respond after a long pause, "Good, good. Prime Minister has grand ambitions. This prince admires it. What this subject wants is not your admiration but your acceptance. As long as Your Highness the eldest prince is willing to accept me, I have plenty of ways to help you ascend the throne." The eldest prince said, "You're helping me, so what benefits do you hope to gain?" Inshuo straightened up his back and earnestly said, "With the covenant established today, you and I will have a ruler-subject relationship. Your Highness is fair in rewarding subjects and punishing them, and you are more casual than the second prince, who flaunts his status as the child born of the Empress. I trust that after Your Highness ascends, you definitely will not forget about the subjects who have helped you along the way." The eldest prince thought for a moment. "Very well, once it has happened, I will tear down the cabinet that Father Emperor has established and return the rights to the Prime Minister. Are you satisfied with this promise?" There have been plenty of cases where a previous system has been discarded when a new emperor ascends the throne. It would not be considered rare. Inshuo smiled with satisfaction. "Aside from this, I have another condition. As long as Your Highness agrees, you will quickly be able to obtain what you desire." Chapter 308 Act Out a Play, Part 1. After hearing what Princess Danyang had to say, the second prince did not have much of a reaction. How can this be considered anything important? He is watching, as the Prime Minister, his powers get taken away by the cabinet, so what's wrong with wanting to take them back? Not only did he feel that there was nothing wrong with it, but he actually praised it. As the Prime Minister, he should have some way of getting it done. If he really can regain his power, it would be of great benefit to me. Princess Danyang was stunned. She did not think that he would react in this way, but he is being so two-faced with Father Emperor. This sort of person is completely unpredictable, and it's hard to say that he won't do something that's even more damaging. Even more damaging. The second prince was completely carefree. On the contrary, he felt that Princess Danyang's words were far more appalling. "He is your husband. Some of his plans are beneficial to us, so we should help him. Of course, Father Emperor currently does not like him, so it's not good for us to help him directly, but there's no need to stop him." "But second brother," the second prince waved his hand and cut her off, "I know that you don't like Inshuo. Although the two of you are now married, there are still some disagreements. But Imperial Brother will give you a piece of advice. You are already married to him, which means that you belong to him. If he wants to do the things that married couples will do, you cannot refuse him. Do you understand?" Princess Danyang was completely confused before her face turned deep red in embarrassment. "Second brother, what are you saying?" Her reaction was within the second prince's expectations, and the second prince stood up from his seat. All right, I won't bring it up again. It seems to have hit a sore spot, so you should understand. Before marriage, a girl obeys her father, and after marriage, she obeys her husband. You need to properly devote yourself to your husband. I'm going to look for Inshuo and see what he and Ning Yizhao are talking about." Princess Danyang did not have a chance to speak before the second prince hastily left. She angrily stomped her feet. "You only think of going back and forth with Ning Yizhao. What am I, your own younger sister, considered to you? She suddenly remembered Yin Jiao, a girl from a prominent family who had been pushed to act as a honey trap by her own older brother. Because she did not want to do it again, she annoyed Yin Shuo, and Yin Shuo refused to allow her to see an imperial physician. For a beautiful girl who had not yet gotten married to have become so ugly, it would be difficult for her to get married with that large scar on her forehead. Why was it that these older brothers wanted to humiliate them more than others did? With the two sharing similar experiences, Princess Danyang empathized greatly with Yin Jiao. Diener, have you sent anyone to check up on young Miss Yin? What did the imperial physician say? Diener entered the room and revealed a look of regret upon hearing this question. The imperial physician said that young Miss Yin's injury cannot be treated. Originally, if it was allowed to heal naturally, the scar would have been lighter. It's all the fault of that maidservant called Payer for searching for some folk remedy. The imperial physician said that it did indeed have some medicine that could help heal the skin, and it could make older scars lighter. Using it on young Miss Yin, however, made it worse. Princess Danyang let out a sigh. A perfectly good beauty was reduced to such a state. It truly is distressing. The two of us can be considered as having a lot in common. Both of our birth mothers died when we were young, and we both ended up with elder brothers who don't care about us. How can that be considered similar? Diener immediately consoled her. Our princess is the daughter of the imperial family and was destined to be noble by birth. Regardless of whether or not Her Highness the Empress passed away, as long as His Majesty and His Highness the Second Prince are still alive, who would dare to bully Princess? This was also true. Princess Danyang was in a slightly better mood. Speaking of it like this, my situation is a little better than hers. All right, go and comfort her for me. Bring along some nutritious food. Also, tell the kitchen that my instructions are that they are no longer permitted to only feed her radish and white rice from now on. They are to provide her with the food that she was given before. Diener bowed. Yes, your husband surely won't go against princess wishes for something so trivial. This servant will go immediately. The second prince had someone inquire about the eldest prince's movements. Hearing that the eldest prince had gone to the outer study, he immediately headed in that direction. Upon arriving at the courtyard where the study was located, he saw a servant standing guard outside. The door to the study was shut, and it was unclear what the people inside were discussing. Seeing the second prince, everyone rushed over to salute him. This prince came to see my brother-in-law. Is he inside the study? The servants hesitated for a moment, replying to second prince, our eldest young sir is here, but the eldest prince is currently discussing something inside. Second prince, please wait here for a moment. This servant will go in and report. Go on. The second prince waved his hand and drew closer to the door. From this position, he could vaguely hear people talking inside. He could hear the sound of chess pieces being played. The two were playing chess inside. Eldest prince, it seems that you will need to concede this round again. Oh, I can't seem to beat you. Let's stick to drinking tea. Hearing these sounds, it was clear that the eldest prince was in a disadvantageous position. As he said, it was rare opportunity for me to come and see you and Danyang. But who knew that second brother would also come? I was even told to wait for such a long time. He said that he is Danyang's elder brother, so could it be that I'm not? Yin Shuo responded in a perfect tone. Naturally, eldest prince is the elder brother of both my wife and brother-in-law. It's just a coincidence that both brothers-in-law came to the manor today. How about I send someone over to ask and see if Danyang and second prince have finished their chat? Visit Wuxia World. EU for extra chapters. There's no need. He and Danyang were born from the same mother. It's natural that they would have many things to talk about. I want to remind you that regardless of whether or not we were born of the same mother, we are still siblings. Prime Minister must not be biased. Before Inshuo could respond, the second prince pushed the door open and stepped inside with a delighted smile. What is eldest brother talking about bias for? Why is it that I can't understand? While he walked inside, he looked over at the servant standing next to the door. Because the eldest prince and Inshuo had been speaking, he never had a chance to report. The second prince had run out of patience and just decided to enter on his own. The eldest prince did not think that he had heard what he had just said, and he felt that the situation was a little hard to accept. Second brother, what's the point of feigning ignorance here? Some people wish to make use of relationships gained through marriage to compete with me, but you also need to think things through. You are not the only one with a relationship to Prime Minister Yin through marriage. The second prince snorted with the knowledge that he had come to the Prime Minister's manor with ulterior motives. It turned out that this was what he had been thinking. He wanted to have Inshuo think of them equally, but how could that be possible? He sat down on his own. I must say, eldest brother is a little too rash. Weren't you very good at acting before this? What is it? Now that Father Emperor has stopped seeing you, you've become this anxious. If you're that anxious, you should be seeking out the heads of the cabinet. Don't you feel that coming to Prime Minister Yin now is a little too late? The eldest prince argued back, if the members of the cabinet were willing to give second brother face, why has second brother still not taken them in? The two went back and forth, neither willing to give up an inch. The eldest prince finally stood up and flicked his sleeves. Prime Minister Yin, the Eastern Palace has not yet been established, so it's extremely difficult to say what the future holds. You absolutely must not be rash in deciding which side to stand on. After saying this, he left without even looking at the second prince. He wore a look of pure anger. After he left, the second prince burst out laughing. Inshuo smiled thinly. Why has second prince come over? The second prince said, if I didn't come, would I not have missed out on such a fun play? That Ning Yizhao is truly helpless, actually rushing to the Prime Minister's manor to try and dig up my cornerstone. Does he really think of himself as Danyang's brother? Before this, I have never seen him suffer such a setback. Today is truly a day to rejoice. Inshuo brought him a new cup of tea. His Majesty has established the cabinet and taken away my authority. He has also warned your highnesses. The eldest prince could not deal with his rashness, which is also quite normal. With this being brought up, the second prince looked at him properly. Father Emperor took away your authority, so you should make some plans for yourself. But you also need to be careful and not allow anyone to get a hold of something that they can use against you. I heard Danyang say that the injury to sister-in-law's face can no longer be healed. Inshuo had not cared about Yin Jiao's affairs for a long time. He could not be bothered to concern himself with people who were of no use to him. He just quietly replied, if it can't be healed, it can't be healed. It's just a girl. It's not important. The second prince's heart shook. He did not think that Inshuo would verbalize such a thing. It was exactly what he had been thinking. You're right. A single girl is unimportant to our grand plans. If I ascend the throne, is there any worry that sister-in-law will be unable to get married? Inshuo cupped his hands and smiled. The smile was sarcastic, but the second prince did not see it. Then I will be relying on your highness. Inshuo will definitely go to any lengths to help your highness ascend the throne. The second prince patted him on the shoulder and laughed, good. You and I are the ones who are truly related through marriage. Of all the officials in court, you are the only one I can trust. At this time, the eldest prince had already left the Prime Minister's manor. Before stepping into his carriage, he glanced at the second prince's carriage. With a contemptuous smile, he turned and climbed into his carriage. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.